All right, so I'm kind of doing something new. I'm doing like these first reaction vlogs of movies I just saw, and I brought a good friend with me. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Tony, and I'm Sammy's friend since childhood.
Yes, and so we just got back from seeing Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and this is actually your second time seeing it?
Second time, so I probably know a little bit more information than you do, but you're also pretty more well-versed in the comic as well.
Yeah, and some of the movie things too.
Yeah.
I wanted to do this as soon as it opened, opening weekend, but unfortunately I got very sick and was unable to do that. But I'm all better now, so now we can actually talk about this movie.
Definitely for sure.
So the first thing I want to talk about is the trailers that we got in front of this movie. First one we got was Thor: Love and Thunder. What do you think of that one?
That one's gonna be a very interesting one. More Thor, basically going to try to decide for himself if he wants to stay back and not be the superhero anymore and just be more. I almost want to say act like a god, kind of like how Odin and what seems to be coming out with this new one, Zeus. He's going to definitely be a big factor into the whole MCU. All the Greek mythology is going to be coming more into play in the new Thor movie.
Yeah, like Russell Crowe's already been cast as Zeus, but I think it's gonna be kind of cameo what they're gonna do. We'll see on this one because I hated Thor Ragnarok, so I'll explain more once we see Thor: Love and Thunder. But I'm a little cautious about it because visually it looks interesting. It looks like lighthearted, you know. Yeah. And another thing I like in the trailer is that the Fat Thor is no more. They're rectifying that, because that was one of my least liked aspects of Avengers Endgame. I just kind of felt it should have been done differently, the way they handled his mental illness.
Yeah, but some people handle it a little bit more differently. He kind of viewed it more of a depression, and generally how depression kind of looked, you can kind of go in many different aspects. And they took the route with his depression more of just being more lazy, you could say. And a lot of gods, I mean, generally, I know most gods, they act lazy most of the time, but he kind of took it a step too far with him being lazy, whatever that be. Was it on the PlayStation?
He was on the PS4, and you see them playing Fortnite, which I cringed in the theater when I saw that, by the way.
That, and he was also drinking beer as well.
Yeah, and he was eating a lot of pizza, too. There was a huge pizza stack in his little house.
Pizza, beer, and playing Fortnite, which, I mean, you can't cope with it and stuff like that. You can get away, from reality, but there at some point, once you're done with it, you're back right into reality. So you can get away with it, but you can't, run away from it forever. And that's what Rocket and kind of initially kind of kept slapping him in the face about during Endgame. But now he has to kind of like go through it in this next film. And definitely seeing his, you could say, alter ego, the She-Thor.
That's another thing too, is we're going to see Natalie Portman as Thor in the next one.
Yeah.
And I hope they do not pull an Abby situation from The Last of Us Part 2 with that, because if they do that, I think I'm going to have a hard time watching this movie.
I highly doubt that they will pull Abby from The Last of Us Part 2. And generally speaking, everyone didn't like that, which has got the very whole controversial. I know some people probably like that, but it was really controversial, and we can all agree on that one.
Yeah, but that wasn't really the voice actress's fault, Abby. That was more Neil Druckmann's fault.
More the director and all the producers during the thing, not so much the voice actress.
Yeah, and I know Christian Bale's going to be the bad guy in the next Thor, which is going to be really interesting, because are we going to see him do the Bat voice almost?
We'll see about that one.
Yeah, either way, Thor 4... we'll go more into it when it comes out. Mm-hmm. We'll see, because I hated the last one, and I'll explain why when we get to that. But we'll see. I know that's the next MCU movie. Anyway, then there was Lightyear, which is the next Pixar movie.
Origin story of Buzz Lightyear, you could say.
I don't really know if it's supposed to be an origin story. It could be like more adventure style.
And that could also be the case too, but yeah, he did jump like 60-some years into the future, definitely for sure.
Yeah, that was another thing the last trailers didn't give away.
Oh, you mean in terms of like jumping into the future and stuff like that?
Yeah, the other trailers were more like they didn't give away too much.
Oh yeah.
This one gave away a little more.
It definitely did, and of course I don't know. We gotta look to more of who's gonna be voice acting the villain in this one. Yeah.
Yeah, Zurg's in the
Zurg,
movie, which
yeah.
I like because you can't do a Buzz Lightyear movie without Zurg.
Definitely.
And when that, I do actually want to do a review of that with you because
Yeah.
I admittedly like Pixar and I want to see this because I am a fan of the Buzz Lightyear character. So
Yeah.
we'll see how that goes. No Jurassic World Dominion trailer in front of this one.
I believe when I saw the Doctor Strange movie for the first time in the theater, I did see Jurassic World being played, the trailer for it. That was still interesting in terms of being part 3, in terms of every dinosaur being released onto basically the whole world,
The mainland and all over the world.
and everything else like that.
I've got quite a lot to talk about with that one, so we're going to save that for the next one.
Yeah.
And then, this is a big one. There was a trailer for Avatar: The Way of Water in front of this one. Do you want to talk about that?
That one, yeah, because I know I watched it when back 09 when it was 08 or 09 when it first released. I don't think you...
I saw it back when it was released, and it was one of the biggest movies that year, because it was the comeback of James Cameron, because the only major movie he had done prior to that was Titanic.
Yep, and that one during that time, it was revolutionary. And it still holds to this day, even re-breaking its box office again after it was initially broken
by Avengers Endgame.
By Avengers Endgame, yeah. And then, of course, it re-broke it, yeah. So it did hold on to the crown for a while, lost it for a hot minute, and then reclaimed its crown as most in the box office.
Yeah, and what I really like about this sequel is we're going to explore the oceans of Pandora, which is something they kind of teased a little, but we're going to see more of it.
They did tease it in the trailer, definitely for sure, and now it's becoming more of who is the new threat, or is this the other colony, basically, of that world? Are they becoming will they kind of step up or become a new threat?
Yeah, and James Cameron has a passion of the ocean, so he's sharing that with us in this, and we're going to see a lot of really good ocean imagery. There's going to be visuals that will probably blow your mind, and it's going to feel like you're there. But the really cool thing about it is Cameron, he actually shot the actors in motion capture underwater.
Yeah.
And they actually had to hold their breath while they were doing this.
Yeah.
That's going to be really interesting. And then Avatar 3, a lot of it's already filmed. They just took it into the post, and that should be out in 2 years.
Yeah, we'll got to see how this one kind of goes. Because I know with some of my other friends, they were very skeptical about it, about the part 2 and part 3. And it was mainly because when I talked about it a little bit about them, about the rumors before the trailer, at least for the second one came out, was that it was over a decade since the movie came out. So it was more of how can it still be successful with the time jump, basically from 09 to 2022, basically.
Yeah, Cameron actually defended that, saying that there was a time jump or time gap between Alien and Aliens, and he made the second one. And Aliens was a very successful movie.
And that is true, but I mean, I kind of forgot how much of a time gap it was between Alien and Aliens. So.
Alien came out in 1979, and then Aliens was 1986.
All right, so not that much of a time gap, a decade, but kind of close enough. We're talking 7 year compared to a decade, over a decade. With
yeah, and then Terminator 1 and 2, there was a big time gap, and both movies were very successful.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, still a time gap, but again, they were almost a decade, but not quite there. Whereas this one is a decade, which has caused some people to be concerned about.
Yeah, but I'm optimistic about it. It might be interesting, and we'll see where it goes.
Definitely, for sure.
All right. So, now, this movie, there's quite a lot that ties into it. You have the first Doctor Strange, you have WandaVision, and there were very little tie-ins to the last Spider-Man movie, Spider-Man No Way Home. First Doctor Strange, what did you think of that?
That was a really good film and more of an introductory of how Doctor Strange became Doctor Strange, basically, and how he gets a little bit more of his powers, all the cloak and some of his abilities. And at the end of the film, him now learning at that time how to become more control and become a little bit more in charge of all the sorcerers and stuff like that. because he was technically the Sorcerer Supreme by the end of the first Doctor Strange film.
Although he still had kind of a lot to learn. I know they established that.
Yeah, they established that definitely for sure in the second one, but there was a couple of like other movies that kind of like talked about a little bit as well. But he did technically kind of reign as Sorcerer Supreme until Infinity War ended, where he was gone for the 5 years, which then Wong came, since he wasn't blipped, he became Sorcerer Supreme.
Yeah, for me, I actually like Doctor Strange. I enjoyed the first one a lot.
Yep.
It's one of my favorites of Phase 3, and I've got... my favorites of Phase 3 are actually Captain America Civil War, the first Doctor Strange. I like Guardians 2 quite a lot. Spider-Man Homecoming, really liked that one. Avengers Infinity War was my favorite of Phase 3.
Oh, yeah.
And as for Doctor Strange, I liked it. I thought it was a very good introduction origin story for the character. It was well acted. There were some really cool visual moments. Although, admittedly, the city sequences, they looked like Inception almost.
Yeah, because they did play a lot with magic, and again, it's kind of like opening to all the magic abilities, which kind of would bring a lot of Inceptions and some other magical, like, into this film, basically.
Yeah, and Christopher Nolan, he made the sequences look very breathtaking, whereas here, they're, like, fun and, like, very trippy.
Yeah.
And there's kind of a difference. And I thought it was very well acted, and admittedly, it's kind of fast with the origin almost. They have to speed through the details just so we can get to all the action, but it's very well done.
Yeah.
I will admit, though, there is an animated Doctor Strange movie from 2007.
If I remember correct, animated Doctor Strange. Yeah, I don't think I've seen that one, but yes, there is something like that.
It's basically an origin story, but it's got a horror take to it. It's very dark. It's well animated, in my opinion, and it had a lot of really cool monster designs, and I really liked the characters. I especially liked their depiction of Dormammu in the Dark Dimension, because that was one of the issues I had with the first movie, is that the Dark Dimension, it really doesn't look that scary.
Well, maybe not to you, like, because again, this is kind of like the outlayer of the Dark Dimension, basically. It's not so much we're going into it. Well, we are going into it, but it's not like in the depths, basically. It's like walking and being the front gates of hell. It doesn't look scary at first until you enter through all the different, like, doors to each of the floors, basically.
Yeah, and we will see more of it, but we're going to get into that a little later. And then I liked the characters of the first one. I liked Doctor Strange himself. I liked Mordo. I liked the Ancient One, although, admittedly, the changes, the creative liberties they made, I mean, I'm fine with them, but I would have been a little more comic accurate. Like, I know the Ancient One's not a woman. It's supposed to be like this, he's like an Asian monk, almost.
I mean, she is still, a monk, basically, in a sense, in the first one. But, of course, she died during the first one. We gotta remember that, too.
Yeah, and she's part of a long line of, like, people who were the Sorcerer Supreme.
Yeah.
But either way, I liked the first Doctor Strange. I think it is a very good introduction origin piece for a new character in the MCU. And when we saw him in later entries, like his little scene in Ragnarok and Infinity War and Endgame and Spider-Man No Way Home, I mean, he's just such a cool character, and he has all these cool magic moments. And I just like how he's so egotistical, but yet wants to do the right thing.
Definitely, but that's part of his kind of as his brilliance in terms of his magical ability. Even though he is arrogant a lot of times, but he can be able to back it up. And that's what comes into his strength, too.
Yeah. And then the second thing that ties into this one is WandaVision.
Definitely. Yeah, she plays a heavy role in this Doctor Strange 2 movie, is her. And how, what she, at the end of WandaVision, like, the whole wanting to basically kind of, like, find her own happiness somewhere else, basically. But again, she got the book of the Dark Hole and everything else like that, which we will talk a lot more of about this film when we dive deep into it. But because of her kind of like experimenting and reading a little bit about it, that's when everything kind of goes south in terms of everybody else. But in terms of her potential, going straight up.
Yeah, what did you think of WandaVision?
WandaVision, I thought, was a pretty good one just because it's going through different sitcom time periods, basically. And if you're a fan of sitcoms, you probably would enjoy WandaVision a lot. and then of course it started picking up at the back end of WandaVision. So it kind of went through like the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and then the current modern sitcom, basically, as we all kind of like grow up, basically from different generations. But of course, while that's happening, you have the investigation, kind of like going Marvel, Avenger level type like investigation, to where you kind of realize at some point that, hey, this isn't like your stereotypical regular sitcom. This is more of Wanda controlling the environment around this city, basically, and Shield, which was take heavily involvement. We're trying to investigate this kind of like this.
Actually, it was a Sword, not Shield.
Sword. Oh, that's right. Sword is the other Shield. Yeah, that's right. Sword was basically playing a heavy toll into this investigation, basically, and they were being more the aggressor rather than trying to be more of leading it and defending. Although that's kind of like, as its name, Sword being more the aggressor, whereas Shield is, being more defense.
I did not like WandaVision. I had a ton of issues with it. My main problem is, I understand they wanted to pay tribute to all these sitcoms of the different decades, but for me, I'm not really into sitcoms, and I just can't really relate to that. So I was bored while watching the entire show, and the investigation stuff, it's really interesting. It's done well. And I would say, like, the last 2 episodes are more action-oriented. We're going more into the story.
Yeah.
But the way I would have done it is, she creates this fantastical world with Vision, because she's dealing with grief. That's one of the big themes of WandaVision.
Yeah.
And the grief theme, it's somewhat handled okay, but not the way I would have done it. Like, I would have had the fantasy world she creates be an amalgamation of the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, 80s, 90s, and onward. And what would that have looked like? Like, how creative do you think they would have got?
It would have been kind of like a, how would you describe it? Almost Looney Toony, basically, because you have different era meshed into one, basically, and that could get a little bit more cartoony a little bit. You could probably imagine a 2000 type car or a modern era type car driving past by like a 1950 home, or maybe one of those like 1950 Chevy, although you probably see that still nowadays, driving past by like a modern home, basically. Sometimes something like that could be normal looking, but if you can imagine like a 2000, like a 2020 Chevy, those big truck, driving past by a 1950 or a 1960 homes, like household or something like that. That can, and all of a sudden you have like these different houses kind of like right next to each other, and then different eras in terms of different people, how they would treat each other. That can get a little bit chaotic too, a little bit, instead of being like something like, okay, 50s, and then kind of grow into the 60s, and different, how people would react to based on the different era. Because it's almost like, again, the whole hypothetical scenarios of like, what if we take somebody from the past and then throw them to the future, see how they would react. They could get a lot scared, basically, in that sort of sense, versus somebody that, if you take somebody from the future and throw them in the past, they could probably be a little bit more amazed of what the past looked like and how much civilization has, risen and how much they've grown from the time that they, jumping back then till now, basically.
Yeah, I could have done it without it looking so cartoony. Like, there's something kind of retro they could have done with it, but yeah. I don't know if they didn't think of it, or maybe they did think of it, but they chickened out and decided not to go ahead with it. Yeah. And, even the visuals were hit and miss in WandaVision. Like, sometimes they looked okay. Like, the white Vision looked pretty good. Yeah. Other times they didn't look so good. Like, I could obviously tell they were computer graphics. That scene with the stork, that looked like a PlayStation 2 cutscene.
Oh, yeah, I think I remember that one.
It was in the 70s episode.
Oh, yeah, 70s one right there. Yeah, that one.
And then the final battle looked extremely artificial. Like, I could tell they were on a green screen. And I know it was affected by the pandemic, so I don't exactly know what kind of budget constraints they were on, but I don't know. But either way, it's like, the show was I just didn't find it interesting enough, not action-orientated enough. I probably would have done it in like 90 minutes tops, or maybe 60 if I could. Because I know I've seen this story where there's this alternate world that a superhero's in. Like, what would their life have been? There's an episode of Batman the Animated Series called Perchance to Dream, where Bruce Wayne's in this world where his parents didn't die in that alley, and he's going to marry Selena Kyle, the woman he loves. But let's face it, Batman's loved a ton of women over the years. And so basically, like, this is what his life could have been, but then he figures out this is all a dream, it's all fake, and the Mad Hatter's behind all this, and then he, like, breaks out and stuff. And that's what happens here almost, but not entirely. Because I know one of the fan theories of WandaVision was that Mephisto was behind all this. That didn't happen. Instead, we get this completely different character called Agatha Harkness, who I didn't mind. I liked her.
Yep.
Although, admittedly, we didn't really get that impressive of a final battle at the end.
Well, because you gotta remember, Agatha, she is technically in the comics kind of like a mentor to Wanda, basically, or to the Scarlet Witch, basically. She may not be as powerful as Wanda herself or the Scarlet Witch in terms of the potential and everything else like that, but she was like the teacher in terms of like how to control her powers and everything else like that. So yes, it wasn't like breathtaking and all this magical potential, but it was kind of like showcasing kind of like the knowledge basically between the two. But you also got the difference between the potential after a student learned basically from the master basically, and what the student, even though it wasn't really like student master, but in terms of comic, how she kind of learned from the mistakes and kind of took it into making it her own power basically, or how she gave able to kind of like double that basically, make it more effective.
I can see that, and maybe and I didn't see too much of a mentorship student thing. They didn't do that in WandaVision.
No, they didn't really do that just because it is, you know, they did play off a little bit differently in the MCU compared to the comics, especially how Infinity War play out, where we know in the comic books Infinity War, almost all the Avengers, including the X-Men, were involved in that conflict, versus, you know, what we saw in the MCU, where it's like a selective, Captain America, Iron Man, and that group.
Yeah, and the reason why they didn't have the rights for the X-Men at the time, so that's why they weren't in there. Yeah. But we are going to see them at some point. We just don't know when.
Yeah, definitely we don't know when. But we do have a timeline. You know, Phase 4. Phase 4 and Phase 5. But we'll get to that point eventually here.
Yeah, and then I also felt WandaVision was a little cliche. Like, you have all the smart characters in the room. They know better than the military does. And the military's like, we want to go in there with the guns. But the smart people are like, no, we gotta figure it all out and sort of approach this smartly. Because I have seen enough of Roland Emmerich's movies to know where this was going to go. And I just didn't think it was like the most original writing of all.
It's not the most original writing, but it is still, because basically how they were going to do this, again, it's the investigation, and there were like 3 smart people basically in that room, or 3 kind of like 3 outsiders, you could say, kind of like the private basically, or privates or little scientists basically. They kind of try to handle it more like what a SHIELD would approach it, versus the general, who was basically one of the heads of the sword. They took it a more aggressive approach, basically.
Yeah, but either way, I wasn't a huge fan of WandaVision. I know some people liked it, and others didn't like it. I was one of them that didn't really like it so much. But at least the other Marvel shows have been more action-orientated. Like Falcon and the Winter Soldier got more action-orientated.
That did get a lot more action-orientated, because WandaVision was more, again, sitcom, which got action in the end. Falcon and the Winter Soldier was a lot more actions right off the bat, while still playing more investigative, type of film, basically. But it was a lot more action-oriented. Then you got Loki, which, in this film, did not play, maybe bare minimum into the film, bare minimum to none in Doctor Strange 2. But it's still in effect in terms of the multiverse type of thing, though. But in terms of story, though, going back to it, it was a lot more investigative while throwing in action-oriented a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to rewatch the first season of Loki at first, but after seeing this movie, I'm actually glad I didn't, because I hardly saw any references in there.
Yeah, hardly any at all. If if not none, basically. But again, what happened in Loki did still take effect of the multiverse.
Yeah, and then there were some references to What If, but we're going to get into that.
There's also some references to Spider-Man No Way Home as well.
Yeah. Now, for this movie, the original director, Scott Derrickson, he was going to come back at first, and he wanted a more horror-orientated approach with this sequel.
Yeah.
Which we did get, and we're going to get into that.
Yep.
So basically, he was going to come back at first,
Yep.
and from what I can tell, he wanted to do something that was along the lines of the movies that A24 makes.
Mm-hmm.
They did things like It Comes at Night, The Witch. They recently released a movie this year called X.
Yep.
And Marvel apparently was on board with this idea,
Yeah.
but then they're like, you might get too much control. We don't want you to get too scary and scare the kids away and stuff. Because let's face it, a lot of families watch these movies.
And it is Marvel. This is superhero. So the fact that you would throw in a good amount of, I mean, they did throw a good amount of horror, but too much would definitely would have turned this from like a PG-13 movie to closer to a rated R film. Basically.
And there was actually a rumor that there was an R-rated cut of this, and I don't know if it exists or not. And maybe there is, I don't know.
There probably is somewhere, because seeing the movie again twice, but definitely how it kind of played out, you could probably imagine there was a R-rated moment somewhere.
Oh, yeah, there's a ton of moments that were like extremely graphic, and we're going to get into that. And so Scott Derrickson, he had experience with horror films. He's done The Exorcism of Emily Rose. He did Sinister, which is probably one of the biggest horror movies he ever did. If he had done a Doctor Strange sequel that was horror-oriented, I wonder if Bagul would have shown up as a cameo.
I don't know, but again, Sam Raimi kind of throwing into his Evil Dead, cameo too, with one of the actor too during the film. That was definitely a little bit nice right there.
Yeah, that's the other thing too, is like Marvel wanted someone who could still deliver a horror angle but still make their movie fun, which is why they hired Sam Raimi. He did the Evil Dead series, he did Drag Me to Hell, but he's also done his own share of superhero movies. He did Darkman, the first one. He also did the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man series.
Yeah.
And I actually read that Raimi was very reluctant to do this movie because of the fallout of Spider-Man 3.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Spider-Man 3 wasn't received well, basically, by some fans. I still enjoyed the Tobey Maguire series myself of Spider-Man.
I do too. I really like the Tobey Maguire series. The third is definitely the weakest because it has to juggle all these storylines. Like, I would have saved Venom for a later movie. Like, Venom is not someone you would do in, like, your third entry. I would have him, like, in the 8th entry or, like, the 7th entry. Because there's other villains we can get to before we get to Venom.
Yeah, definitely. But they did throw him in there along with the Sandman and along with Harry, who became the
Green Goblin successor, but they didn't really do too much with that, which was disappointing because the end of Spider-Man 2 sets him up like, oh, that's cool, we're going to see him put on the suit, he's going to get his revenge. Yeah. They kind of do that, but they don't go full the way with it. And apparently that was Sam Raimi's idea. He wanted Harry to be somewhere in between. I would have gone maybe a villain route, and we could have had the conflict in there. But I just wanted to see Harry in the Goblin suits that Willem Dafoe wore.
Which he almost did. He didn't wear it completely. He kind of wore it like basically 90%. The only 10% which was missing was the helmet, basically.
And then he could have had like a voice modifier built into the suit where it sounds like Willem Dafoe, and he's like, "Hey, Spider-Man, remember me?" And then he's like, "How'd you come back?" and stuff like that. And then he figures out kind of quick that it's Harry.
Yeah.
But no, they don't go ahead with that.
No, but I think still Spider-Man would have like probably figured it out fairly quickly that it wasn't, the Willem Dafoe or that Green Goblin. He probably would have figured out it probably was Harry underneath that helmet, basically, because it would have been like, but you were dead, basically.
Yeah, like it would have been some kind of trickery, but they didn't. I guess they didn't think of that.
Yeah, definitely for sure. And then again, Sandman being involved too, and his storyline during that Spider-Man was a little bit more, basically more. You could say saddening a little bit because again, saddening, but you also realize he is a criminal basically. But again, the sad part of it was he was trying to do it for his daughter, but It's kind of hard when you're a criminal, basically.
Yeah, I didn't mind Sandman's story. I thought it was very well done, and I mean,
Yeah.
we could have seen him in a later movie.
Definitely.
But anyway, your initial reaction to Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness?
My initial one was it was a really good film, basically, and how it kind of like started off right away being action right off the bat instead of being slow paced. It kind of jumped right into this different Doctor Strange right off the bat. The Defender. I know some people were calling the Defenders Doctor Strange.
Oh yeah, that variant. It's supposed to be inspired by the Defender of Doctor Strange. We're gonna get into that.
And then him and American Chavez just running away from a demonic creature, basically, that was chasing after American Chavez in terms of trying to claim her power, basically. Or,
are we getting into the spoilers right now? Because I needed to give my initial reaction before.
Oh yeah, definitely, for sure.
I quite enjoyed the movie. I liked it. I thought this was better than most people were saying, because I heard positive and somewhat mixed reactions on this.
Yeah, it was a positive but negative, but it's still a little bit more positive about this film, basically.
Yeah, and I also was warned that this may not be a sequel to Doctor Strange necessarily. It could be a WandaVision sequel. And it kind of is, but not really.
I would say, I mean, it kind of played out like that way to me personally, only because she took the entirety of, like, kind of like, it's almost like taking the main role away, even though, we'll get into it a little bit here, but she kind of basically kind of like took the starlight, or like, you know, the spotlight away from what was supposed to be his film, but it's like, she was kind of like the main spotlight of the film.
I don't think she took away the spotlight. I actually thought there was good enough balance where nobody was taking up screen time and everybody got the amount of time that was needed.
You could say that in terms of spotlight, in terms of like the time frame and everything else like that, but in terms of presence, basically, like what her presence kind of like put into the film, basically, was a lot more than Doctor Strange, basically, or it felt like her presence, even if she was not in a certain scene, was felt, basically, throughout the film, more so than Doctor Strange.
All right. Okay, so we're going to get into spoilers now, but I mean, a lot of people probably have seen the film already. I know I'm a little late to the party, but this is where we go in depth and we spoil as much as we can. So,
yeah.
Right away. We start off with an action sequence, like we're thrust immediately into the action.
Yep.
And we're in some kind of multiversal dimension, or like really cosmic-y, you know?
Yeah, basically it's like that little wormhole basically between different multiverses, basically. And again, the Defender, Doctor Strange, basically kind of showed up, basically. And him and America Chavez was trying to go for the book, basically.
Yeah, like they're going after this mystical book that... I wasn't following this all because I need to watch this again. There's a ton of details I probably missed, but what does that book do again? Like,
it's basically it's almost like what gives the sorcerer almost like infinite amount of power, basically. It's almost like a kind of like the Book of the Damned, basically. It's like,
oh, it's like the good book,
sort of like that, yeah, but still kind of like, it's like the good book of the evil book, basically, but still can corrupt you in a way, basically, just because that book, it may be sort of good because it is all bright and all that stuff.
These books are actually like the Ring of Power almost from Lord of the Rings, where it tempts someone to use its power, and if you use it too much, you'll become something you never were before. You'll become a monster. Yeah,
definitely, that's for sure, because this book is basically all these type of books is the way to kind of counteract against dark being, basically. But again, in this perception, it's more of dark versus, light versus dark, but still you have to use dark against the dark, basically, to combat it.
Yeah. So we're introduced to this new character, America Chavez, and she's with a variant of Doctor Strange that, like you said, is inspired by the Defenders. And so they're getting chased by this giant mummy demon thing. It looks like a giant mummy blob.
Yeah. And it looked like they're about to kill him, but we later realized that it was more of a kidnap attempt rather than a murder attempt.
Yeah. And so the Defender Doctor Strange, he obviously doesn't make it.
No, he does not, because he got basically stabbed in the back by the mummy creature.
Yeah, and so America Chavez, she opens up a portal to escape.
Yep.
And does the creature follow again, or does it like shape shift? Because I can't recall if the mum. I don't think the mummy one did.
He kind of fell through, but I think he kind of just like, I think he kind of disappeared at some point because both her, America Chavez, him with that defender, and the mummy creature kind of like went through the wormhole basically. Then, of course, right as we're kind of falling through, we kind of go back to the MCU's Doctor Strange, waking up what he kind of thought was a nightmare kind of like scenario.
This is a sequence, this is a concept that I actually found really interesting, is that the idea that these multiverse universes, they may be dreams, but they're not actually dreams. I thought this was a really cool concept, because it's like, what if the dreams we have, we're looking at another life?
And that is definitely a thing as well. Or you could be even seeing a premonition or a major deja vu, whatever the case may be. If you saw a past, but then you lived that, but all of a sudden you've dreamt of it again. Or you see something, but you know it never happened. It didn't happen, but then later down the road, you lived that, basically. Lived that through in your current time. That either a major premonition or a major deja vu, or again, you are seeing a different universe of yourself going through this life, basically.
Yeah, it was really cool, and it started to make me think, like, what if the other characters in the MCU have had this, and like, what if they've seen their alternative realities? Because in What If, we see all these alternative realities, and it's like, what if the characters, I don't know if they intentionally dreamt that or not. What if they saw that?
I don't highly doubt it. The only one that have like major nightmare that we've seen in the film has been Iron Man. If you remember from Age of Ultron, when Wanda kind of like tapped into his dream, basically.
Oh yeah, and like she does all those little trickery things.
But she was the one when she tapped into Iron Man, had a major premonition about Thanos and his invasion of Earth, basically. Even though that never occurred, but it did happen later on, basically, of him invading Earth, basically.
Yeah, now I know what you're talking about. That scene where he sees all the big alien Chitauri, they're coming.
Yep.
You see all the Avengers defeated, and that doesn't actually happen in Infinity War, but it was really like, it's like, it just made me think, like, what if the other characters had seen stuff like this?
Maybe, but, I mean, again, most of them, it's more of like a highly doubt it, unless, again, you are within either magical or maybe too smart for your own good, basically. Mm-hmm. It almost seems like that way. Maybe Captain America, because he is heroic and stuff like that, may have had a premonition or had a major deja vu, especially with Carter, just because of his love interest and stuff like that, and how much, because he did time jump from 40s to 20s, to 2000s, basically.
Yeah, he was frozen in a block of ice.
Frozen.
Cryogenic sleep almost, and then he, like, comes back. But imagine if Captain America dreamt up like Captain Carter. Like, unintentionally, he sees his girlfriend as, like, her superhero version, and then he's like, let's fight the bad guys together,
Yeah.
That actually would have been a cool sequence as a joke. Maybe someone will do that. I don't know.
I don't know, but, I mean, that would have been something else, though, too, yeah.
Yeah. So immediately after Strange wakes up, he goes to the wedding of Christine Palmer because, obviously, they didn't get together.
No, but you still, I mean, obviously, if you're still friends, you still attend, even though maybe you as a person, if you still have feelings for them, that you may feel awkward, and maybe that person may feel somewhat awkward, but if you're both friends, you kind of understand, and you still go to it, though.
Yeah, because, like, that scene in Spider-Man 2 where Harry goes to Mary Jane's wedding?
Oh, yeah?
And he kind of still has these feelings for her almost, and it's kind of awkward for him, because, that's another thing. Sam Raimi kind of copied a few things from his Spider-Man movies in here. This is kind of one of them, but not entirely.
Not entirely, where Harry kind of like disrupt the wedding to a degree, basically. In this one, it was more of like a awkward but still friendly type of thing between him and Christine, basically. Yeah. Where it was still awkward because he brought it up about his feelings a little bit, but they were still being friendly towards one another. And then she asked him the one big question, which will kind of be played out throughout this. Will kind of be played out, but also asked again in the film: "Are you happy?"
Yes, and actually with the wedding sequence, I was like, this early in the movie? Because when I saw the trailers, I thought this was going to happen a little earlier, or this might be an alternative scenario.
Oh, like one of those like time jump or something like that.
Yeah, like I thought it was going to be either later on in the movie or it was going to like be in another universe, but
Yeah.
they didn't do that. And in the theater, I was like, this early? And it's like, it's strange. And actually, this might have been a funny joke that they could have put in the movie, but I know an abridged series person will do it, where there's this telepathic communication between Stephen Strange and Christine Palmer, and telepathically, Christine's like, oh, he's my new husband. You're not jealous, are you? And then Stephen Strange goes, grrr. And then he like does all this weird magic stuff, and he makes him do all this embarrassing stuff. And then telepathically, she's like, you still have it in you, do you? And then Stephen Strange is like, honey, you don't know the half of it. That would have been a funny joke had they done that.
It would have been a little bit too cheesy, in my opinion, if they would have done that route. In my opinion, basically. It would have been too cheesy.
I mean, okay, yeah, but it's still kind of just that funny stuff they put in a bridge series that I admittedly would have found funny. And so they have this little conversation, like, where they're like, he's happy for her almost, sorta, kinda.
I think you kind of tell too, and even Wanda, later on. I mean, she kind of said it too to him, but we'll get to that in a little bit. In terms of answer the question of are you happy, basically, because again, if you had still a feelings towards someone and they kind of moved on from you, it's kind of going back to the question: are you really happy, basically?
Yeah, that was one of the big themes of are you really happy with the universe you're in? But we'll get into that. So after the wedding sequence, then we get to this big action sequence where America Chavez is being chased by some Cthulhu-looking monster that's got one eye in the center. It's like a giant squid octopus thing.
Yeah, definitely. It is one of the more dark dimension creature, basically, which is decently powerful. But again, Doctor Strange should easily, him and I know Wong came in to help out a little bit as well. But it's one of those things where it's like, you shouldn't have that much of a hard time beating this type of creature, basically.
Yeah, and this was actually a really fun sequence where we see them fight the monster and they're working together as a team. Yeah. And then Chavez is all scared and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think she helps a little bit.
I mean, not really. She's more of like trying to hide, basically, more off. Well, the only thing she may have like helped out a little bit was just kind of like throw rocks or kind of like pummel rock into them, but not really. She was more of trying to run away, basically. Kind of like almost every other damsel, or not just damsel, but every other like kind of like child or any other like innocent person who is in danger because they don't know like their strengths or power or don't know why they are that important. Run away from a enemy or a monstrosity that's trying to get them for a reason, basically.
Okay. So yeah, it's a very fun sequence because like he's struggling against this monster. This monster is a very tough opponent, and so I just liked the tension of how this monster. It's like we got to figure out how to beat this thing. It's got all these tentacles. Yeah. And there's a few they may be cut off. I don't remember. But then he like ends up stabbing it in the eye, and this was actually one of the gory scenes in the movie because there is some gore in this movie.
It was a little bit of some. Yeah, that was the first part of gore. Well, couple of parts, but that was a major gore sequence to where stabbing in the eye and then plucking it out, basically.
Yeah, and you see like the little innards and stuff.
Yeah.
But that was still a pretty cool kill.
Yep.
So then, like, they meet up with America Chavez. They want to know more about her, and it's established that she is a dimension jumper.
Basically, yeah, because she does have the power to jump into different multiverses, basically, because every other universe she is not involved. Basically, because she is kind of like, again, a multiverse jumper, basically. She is a different type of being, basically.
Yeah, and so with her character, she's trying to figure out how to use her powers, but she's terrified of it. And so throughout the movie, they're sort of like telling her, you can do this, you just need to get control.
She is terrified, but yet she's also not trusting of everybody, just because she is basically, it's the idea of stranger danger, basically. And she kind of like basically has that idea around her of stranger danger, basically. And after what her first Doctor Strange sequence, being with the Defender, nearly trying to attempt to take, all of her power, which would have cost her life, is now a little bit more reluctant to kind of like be with Doctor Strange, basically. Because she's terrified of what he could do to her after what her previous Doctor Strange tried to do to her.
Yeah, and so the body of the previous Strange ends up going with her, and so we got to bury this guy because, well, we just can't leave him the way he is.
Which can be just be thrown over there in the corner.
That, or I mean, yeah, they threw him in the corner, and like, why didn't they throw him in a cemetery? Like, they should have done that.
And you have to be quick about it. I mean, like he said, buried worse.
And then so basically he's learning about all the multiverse. America Chavez is telling him all this, and so he and Wong say, we've had experience with the multiverse, and if you've seen the events of Spider-Man No Way Home, then you know what he's referencing.
Definitely, for sure. But then, of course, they ask about, what the creature had on it, which was, they mentioned ruins. And again, no, only witches or, like, kind of wizardry.
They know about this kind of stuff.
They know more about it. And Doctor Strange, they only know one person that has that type of power, basically, to do so.
Yeah. So they go to Wanda, and we see her in her cabin, like what we saw at the end of WandaVision.
Yeah.
And so Doctor Strange goes to her, and he's like, what do you know about the multiverse?
Yeah, but before that sequence kind of occurred, she did have a dream, kind of how similar how Doctor Strange dreamt. She had a dream of her other self in another universe with her kids, basically. Again, after the end of WandaVision, she's trying to go to her kids. She dreamt about her kids, having the happy life. And then she wakes up. And then that's when, she's on her field, and Doctor Strange, like you said, came up to her and asked her about, what do you know about the multiverse?
Yeah, and when they do that sequence, her dream sequence, they play the WandaVision theme again. You hear it. Or one of the many themes. I know there were different themes in the show.
Yeah.
So yeah, he goes to her, and he's like, what do you know about the multiverse?
Yep, and she explained that Viz has, the theories and how it could be dangerous, which they both agreed upon the fact that it was dangerous. He was right.
This is a question I had, and I don't remember where it was. Where did the Vision come to his theories of the multiverse? Because I don't remember him talking about it.
Who talking about it?
The Vision, because she's talking about Viz had his theories.
Viz, a different vision, but Viz, basically. Different person. But anyways,
different person.
Yeah.
Because I don't remember this in like a previous Marvel sequence.
Yeah.
Because I rewatched WandaVision with that line in mind, and I don't think Vision told her about it.
But again, it was more about the fact that, again, the whole multiverse definitely is dangerous, basically, in terms of like stepping into different realities, and kind of like conflating or kind of like interfering, basically. Hey, of different dimension, even though you are in that universe, but if you step in that reality, that could be a whole problem, basically.
So they're having their conversation, and then it's revealed that Wanda is actually the bad guy.
Yeah, the bad person in the film, because they were because he was talking about bringing her or trying to get Wanda to, to come to, to the palace, basically, and trying to like take care of American Chavez. But she said, why not bring America here and I can take care of her? But Doctor Strange kind of was like, I didn't tell you her name. I didn't tell you who she was.
It's like she must have read his mind or something.
It was more of basically like she kind of jumped ahead too soon, basically, because she know who she is. But she had to play dumb, or she had to play dumb, basically. And like she said, Hex was the easy part. Lying is not her suit, basically.
Yeah, and so she lifts the Hex. And then it's basically this, like, nightmarish kind of landscape that she's created. Because if you saw at that post-credit scene at the end of WandaVision, she's reading the Darkhold.
Yep.
And Agatha stated this, that the Scarlet Witch is more powerful than the Sorcerer Supreme and is destined to take over the world, apparently.
Yep, which, again, Wong kind of talked about with it, with all the sorcerers, because she is really powerful. And again, it is a step above the Sorcerer Supreme. And this is where I talked about this with my other coworkers, at work, and I talked about this with my other group of friends, in terms of my big issue with the film is the power scale, basically.
The power scale between Scarlet Witch and Doctor Strange?
Doctor Strange, yeah. And that is being this. Yes, I can understand it was stated back in the WandaVision that she is, a little bit more powerful than the Sorcerer Supreme. But they are equal almost nearly equal in terms of power level, basically. And in this film, I kind of feel like they took that and went the distance, basically, rather than kind of like they're about here in terms of power. She's up here, he's down here, so it almost feels like he's on the losing end almost a whole lot more.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like she's harnessed all this power, and I guess really that was more like the tension of the film is like you got this more powerful threat.
Yep.
And you're going to struggle at first, but eventually you're going to defeat the threat.
Eventually, yeah, but again, you kind of have to, because I know he has to play a little bit more defensive, but he is still capable enough of taking her on a little bit instead of being like lasting like a couple minutes. He could last like 10 minutes or so against her, basically, in a one-on-one combat, rather than her overpowering him, basically.
I think the reason why he held back was because there's a line in the first movie where Doctor Strange says, "When I became a doctor, I swore to save lives, not take them."
Yep.
And he kills one of the acolytes of Caecilius.
Yep.
Like, he gets rid of the astral form. So I think that's what he's doing here, is like he's holding back because he doesn't want to kill Scarlet Witch, and he wants to try and maybe bring her back.
Yeah.
And we're going to get into that. And so, basically, they do reference the events of Infinity War and WandaVision in this sequence where they're talking. And so, Strange is like, I was at war. I had to make a tough choice. I had to do what had to be done.
And she said, "What? And how's that any different than what she's trying to do, basically?"
Because, like, you do it, you're the hero. You do it, I'm the villain. That doesn't seem fair. But I'm like, well, first off, you enslaved an entire town and mind controlled these people into a false reality, like Matrix style almost. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you're the bad guy here. I mean, you're going to do stuff that will be questionable. And I understand you were grieving and whatnot, but it's like, I mean, it is what it is.
But her perspective of he did one thing which caused, at the time, a bunch of lives, basically, where she, in her perspective, was like, she took over a town, basically, so the body count is in her favor in terms of not that many at the time versus him, which has a bunch of body counts, basically. You gotta keep that in mind. He has a lot of body counts.
He has a lot of body counts?
Well, in terms of like what he did, because he said, "There was no other way." Remember how he mentioned it more than a few times? There was no other way, no other way. And of course, the body count, because again, after the end of the Infinity War, the blip of like so many lives, and of course, after the blip, so many other people died.
Oh.
Even during the blip, that didn't get blipped, but they still died, basically.
Oh, I get what you're saying, but that wasn't really Doctor Strange's fault because that was meant to happen within his timeline.
Could there have been another way, though? That's the thing, though, where it's like, everyone kept, and we get to this at the end, where it's like the people kept telling him, it's this way or this way, but he chose a different path.
Yeah, like, there's other ways they could have done this, and if you ever saw the parody of how it should have ended when they did Infinity War, there's like multiple ways they could have defeated Thanos.
Yep.
And those should have happened, but not really. The timeline's playing out the way it is.
Yeah, but it's just like one of those things where it's like a lot of people say, well, you could have done this, or you could have done that, or he could have held back, or this person could have held back instead of, beating the crap out of Thanos. And I'm more referring to Star-Lord, basically, in that sequence where he could have held back his punches, before.
But Star-Lord couldn't control his emotions because he really loved Gamora. And
Definitely.
They try to stop him, but obviously that doesn't work.
But I'm just saying, like, if you could have hold back his emotion, which, again, we all lot of understand, but if you would have hold back for at least 5 more seconds as they were getting the glove off, they could have done it, and they could have, they could have prevented all that from happening, basically.
Yeah. I want to say that Wanda's descent into villainy kind of reminded me of Anakin Skywalker almost. Not entirely, but let me explain. So she starts off like she's helping Ultron because she and her brother Pietro, they have a grudge against Stark since his weapons were used in Sokovia. So they join forces with Ultron, but then they realize that Ultron's the big bad. We got to stop him, and they join up with the Avengers. And then later on, like, Wanda does eventually join the Avengers and tries to be the hero, but she still kind of does some stuff where it's like she's not fully good guy and can do things that have unintended consequences. That scene in Civil War where she gets the bomb up with crossbones to the building and then people inside are like either grievously injured or more than likely killed.
Yeah. And definitely for sure, and she does have a love interest, and again, he died by her power, but again, it wasn't like with Anakin, where it's like, there were so many ways he could have got out of it without killing Padme. She was thrust into the action of, and he was gravely wounded too, Thanos was walking right there, it was either they keep running and then he eventually catches up to him, or blow up one of the stones, and he doesn't get the stone, thus preventing him from doing the snap, basically.
Yeah, and had they maybe defeated Thanos, because I know how it should have ended this, they could have found a way to bring him back, the Vision.
Well, they kind of did, but then didn't. But yeah, it was kind of more... Well, they sort of did in WandaVision.
Yeah, but what I was trying to say is, like, with Anakin, he doesn't want Padme to die. He can't live without her. And the same thing applies to Wanda. She can't live without her loved ones.
Yeah.
And she's like, I can't live without him. So she turns to these evil things just to get what she wants.
Yeah.
But in the end, she ends up losing all of this.
Well, technically Vision is still alive, if you remember from the end of WandaVision, where the Mind Stone Vision, kind of like... It's almost like putting that flash drive with a memory disk right back into the original body. Now he remembers everything.
Yeah, like, oh yeah, when are we going to see the White Vision again?
Don't know, but again, he did get all the memory back, basically.
Yeah, he could have shown up in this movie, maybe, but I don't know how he would have fit into the plot line.
I don't know, but, I mean, that would have been a hard one to plug in there, because nobody knows that he's alive, basically, because... Even though it is White Vision, but it is still Vision because he got all the memory back. But
So
they don't
yeah,
know where he ran off to.
So yeah, I mean, I kind of found it similar to Anakin with Wanda, but it's not entirely similar. It's just there's little things about it that remind me of it, you know.
I mean, I could see that a little bit, but again, she had, she could have like held back. Basically, I know that with Anakin, he could have also held back, but again, with Wanda blowing up Vision. At that time, it was like, either you run and he catches up, Thanos catches up, or you blow up the Mind Stone and he doesn't get it. But of course, they didn't know that he had the Time Stone where he could just revert everything back.
Yeah, they didn't know that, and that was actually a really suspenseful moment. But anyway, so like Wanda goes, bring her to me or surrender her to me, and I won't do any harm.
Yeah,
something like that. But then at Carmartage, they're all preparing for the battle.
Yep.
And then she comes in this big misty cloud.
Yep.
And then she shows up. And then Doctor Strange goes up, talks to her. He tries to negotiate with her. It doesn't work. And then there's this big battle sequence where they shield it up. But then, like, she gets inside and gets one of the weaker sorcerers. Gets him to lower his guard. And then she ends up causing a lot of damage. Yeah. Probably killing or injuring some of the sorcerers in the process.
Yeah, there's definitely a good chunk of them dead. Good chunk of them were mainly injured. Negotiations were, as Obi-Wan would say, since you brought up Star Wars, negotiations were short. Because she did brought up, a different universe, where he was going to be happy with Christine. Obviously that kind of stabbed right there into where, or kind of went right below the belt, basically. Because she went through the feelings, basically, and that didn't bowl too well with Doctor Strange, basically. Because again, he had feelings for her, so obviously going where it hurts, where the jugular is at, definitely is not a good way to do it.
Yeah, and so basically she gets through all the forces and then starts chasing them all down. And then there's this sequence where she comes through like a golden metal gong, I think it was.
Well, because of the reflection, basically, because he...
Yeah, he puts her in the mirror dimension. Really cool sequence. And she's like trapped, and then all these spikes are coming out.
Yep.
And then she like throws one of her projectiles. It's like...
Yeah, but then she kind of realizes pretty quickly that she can kind of go through it like water, basically, which means any sort of reflection she can kind of go through, basically. So she was able to kind of like use the mirror dimension to her advantage, basically, once she figures it out in terms of like, okay, I'm going to drag everyone through it, trap them in there, or worse, which we don't see. And then they kind of realize like, oh crap, she's using all the reflection, cover everything up. And then once she kind of like sees where America Chavez is, she goes to like the next one and the gong kind of had all the reflections, so she
Yeah.
goes through their ring vibe, basically.
Yeah, this is something I wanted to talk about with the horror angles. Like, she comes out of the gong, and then she comes out in a, like, contortionist kind of way.
Again, like ring sort of vibe, you know.
Yeah,
like
where,
the girl.
like, Samara comes through the VHS tape through the
Yeah.
TV.
Yep.
Only, I've seen that sequence, by the way. It's pretty messed up.
Yeah, and then of course she kind of like retorts back to her normal self, and then all like the blood veins and everything else like that kind of fades away, basically.
Yeah, and then so basically, I kind of forget what happens next. She tries to get the power of America Chavez.
Negotiations were right back up and running again, but it was more of like kind of like explaining her side a little bit and showing a glimpse of what she sees, and them kind of explaining that, but they're not they're not really your kids, or more of what happens to their mother, what happens to that Wanda.
Yeah.
If she tries to go in there, because again, if there can't be two of the same person in the same universe, so one has to go.
Yeah, and then she gets this. There's this moment where like the camera gets in on her face, and this is like kind of a really scary sequence where I'm like, I think she's gonna lash out.
Yep.
And she does, but it's like this is really unnerving. It's like
He kind of struck first, because it was more of him striking first, actually, because they both kind of had that tension of like, one of them is good. It's like that one of them is going to shoot first, and then he shot first, basically before she even had a chance to. But of course, she outdueled him, basically.
yeah, it's like this slightly angry look in her face almost, or
Well,
this slightly menacing look.
Because he was going at the angle of, you are going to hurt somebody, and she kept saying she's not the monster and all this stuff. But they're explaining to her that no, what you're doing is acting like a monster, basically. And she doesn't view herself as that way, even though she's acting like one.
Yeah, she's a psychopath in this movie where she thinks what she's doing is right. She doesn't believe what she's doing is wrong, and that's what really drives her throughout this movie.
Well, she realizes what she's doing. She doesn't like what she's doing, so she knows it's sort of wrong in a way. But what she's doing is more of wanting to find happiness, and that's what her end goal was. And it's like, what's wrong with me trying to find that happiness? But the problem was, that happiness is going to cause so much destruction and chaos and sadness to everyone else around.
Yeah, I guess so. So she tries to, the negotiations break down, and then there's like a big fight sequence, and then so she tries to get America Chavez, but then she like opens up a portal, and Doctor Strange follows her in. This sequence was really cool, by the way, where we see all the different universes, and we get brief little snippets of them. The one I didn't expect was the cartoon one that they go through. That was like, whoa.
Well, different universes too, other than cartoon. Different, like, all of a sudden futuristic or medieval.
Then there's the Cretaceous period, because we see a T-Rex and a
yeah.
Triceratops fighting.
And then you also got the dimension of where they're kind of like in blocks, they're kind of like fading
Yeah, and
away.
the cubes, and that must have been a really painful experience. Where
And
it's
then
like,
what's more, that, or what about being the paint, just being completely liquidly paint?
oh, they kind of teased that in the last movie, that there's some kind of paint universe. Almost.
I know, but imagine being a paint though. If you thought being a cube would be painful, imagine trying to be a liquid paint.
I wouldn't mind being liquid. At least I could reform my body and stuff.
Yeah, but I kind of feel like it would be a lot more painful, basically, because imagine like an arm, kind of like that.
So yeah, that was a really fun sequence where we see all the different universes.
Yeah.
So they end up in this universe, and they end up in New York City, and this was actually really cool, but we see it's like green. The city's like green, like they're environmentally friendly almost.
More environmentally friendly, and also different way of sort of life, per se. Example being, green means stop, red means go.
Yeah, it's like the direct opposite almost. And then you see a waterfall come out of the Empire State Building, which that was a really cool visual, by the way.
It is, definitely. And then you got pizza balls, basically, as a food, basically.
Oh, we gotta talk about this sequence, because Bruce Campbell's cameo is right here.
Definitely, yep.
Which, if you know Sam Raimi, he's a frequent collaborator. They've been working since the original Evil Dead. It was nice to see him again.
Yep. And of course, he was the one that's, because she's like, everything is, there's a lot of things in the universe that's free, but it's like, oh, nope, you have to pay. It's like, oh boy, how much, basically?
Yeah, I like that they're kind of doing this, everything's free food, But then they backtrack on that. It's like, nope, you got to pay for that.
Yep.
Because American Chavez is a good pickpocketer. Because there's a scene early on where she pickpockets the sling of Doctor Strange, you know?
But they realize that right off the bat, like, she took my sling. It's like, she took your sling. And it's just like, you know, she was able to kind of blend away, and then come back with the pizza balls. And then, which I know at some point that's going to be made into almost any Disney theme park, basically. I would imagine pizza ball being a thing.
Oh, they'll definitely do that. They got a ton of Marvel attractions. They'll do that.
Yeah, because I know when they got Star Wars and they made the park, they made blue milk and green milk. So I can imagine pizza ball will be the next thing.
They made green milk? Like in The Last Jedi, when Luke's taking out that green milk from the walrus things?
They did make green milk, and there's also blue milk. I have not tried it yet, but they did talk about having make those things.
Oh, dear gosh.
Yeah.
So then as they're walking through the city, they come across this memory place almost.
Yep.
And I was like, this is like Total Recall almost, where you could put fake memories or you could recall stuff.
Yep.
Although I haven't seen Total Recall in its entirety, original and remake. So he steps on this platform, and it's like, we're offering you to relive your memories at a discounted price.
Yeah.
And so he sees this scene where I think they're college age.
Yeah, because they were talking about student loans, basically.
Yeah, there's a college-age Christine in Doctor Strange.
Yep.
And so she hands him the watch that we saw in the first movie that has her initial signature on the back, and it's like, only time will tell if I love you or not.
Yep.
And that was basically like how he got the watch.
Yep. And then, of course, that played into his, heartstrings and all that stuff, and he's like, this is a waste of time. Then America Chavez stepped on it. She saw her memory with her parents, basically her mothers, and of course she got frightened by the bee, which sucked her mothers down the wormhole, basically. And then her 10 seconds later, which we know at that point, again, which we see, she's in a completely different universe where her parents are also in a different universe.
Yeah, there was actually a brief origin sequence right there where she was raised by loving mothers. And then she's like, what did she pick up again? Because I forget what it was.
She picked up a flower.
Okay, she picked up a flower. And then it's a yellow jacket, actually.
Yeah,
it looked like a yellow jacket. And so this yellow jacket lands on her. She gets terrified. Understandable. I've been stung by one. And so basically, she opens her powers because the powers are triggered by emotions of fear or anger.
Just emotions in general, basically.
Yeah, and so the mothers, they get flung in. And then it's revealed they're not actually dead. They're still out there. She's just got to find them.
It wasn't really, we weren't entirely too sure that if they're alive or dead. But there's this speculation of, basically if they were tough as you are or anything like that, they're able to live, probably find a place to stay or hide or whatever the case is. They're out there somewhere. You don't know if they're dead or alive. She thinks that they're dead because of thrusting into a wormhole, and she assumes the worst, which I can understand for some people. If you're going thrown into a different universe where you don't even know where you at, that could be a problem. But it's like for Doctor Strange perspective, it's like, no. If they're as tough as you are, they could be able to survive.
Yeah, I mean, they're probably still alive. They're probably still dead. I don't know what they're going to do, but we might see more of America Chavez in the future. And so, we got to get back to Scarlet Witch and Wong. So Wong survives.
Yep.
And so we see her using the Darkhold to get into this alternate reality where she does have her kids. Yep. And this is another one of the horror angles where it's like demonic possession.
Yeah.
And it's really well done, actually.
Well, yeah, because it is the sequence of dream walk, basically, or taking possession of your body in a different universe, basically. Kind of like still when we talked about in the beginning in terms of dreaming a different you in a universe or something like that, where it's it's you but in a different parallel universe or different type of Yeah.
I actually noticed this with the kids. They had both a PlayStation 3 and an Xbox 360 under their TV. I literally saw this in the background.
Yeah.
And I'm like, in WandaVision, they have GameCube controllers, PlayStation controllers, and a Wii.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And it was the original PS3 model.
Yeah.
The original fat model.
Yeah.
That's what it was. And I'm like, wow, that's so nostalgic.
Yeah.
Because, I remember when the PS3 came out, and that was, everybody lined up just to get that. And it's like... Yeah. And seeing the old Xbox 360 model, man, that's so nostalgic.
Yeah, definitely for sure.
And so, like, eventually, there's it's revealed that a sorcerer did survive the attack. She was knocked out.
Yeah.
And so she eventually destroys the Darkhold, but in the process, she becomes Ash.
Yeah, but before that, though, before we get to that point, remember, they did meet up, Doctor Strange and America Chavez did meet up with the different universes,
Oh yeah, they meet up with a different version of Mordo, and this is something I want to talk about because in the first movie, there's a post-credits scene where he goes to meet Jonathan Pangborn, and he steals like the magic that made him walk again.
Yeah.
And he's like, too many sorcerers, and I'm like, oh, we're gonna kind of see a continuation of his story in the next movie. No, we didn't get that. Instead, we get a different version.
Yeah.
And when he meets up with them at first, he's like all serious and stuff. But then his mood brightens up because he's like, "How you doing, Steven?"
Kind of like old buddies, but at the same time, it's just like, because again, that he's different, obviously, from that one. But of course, he's Sorcerer Supreme in that universe because obviously Doctor Strange died because we see the statue.
Yeah, but we'll get into that. Yeah, there's a statue where they dedicated him to his fight against Thanos.
Yep.
And that was actually really cool to see because it's like, if another superhero went to a different universe and they saw that, like, how would they react? Because, like, I know in DC, they built a statue to Superman after his fight with Doomsday. Mm-hmm. So what if an alternate version of Superman saw that? And how would he react?
More surprised, because it'd be like jumping into the future or past or a different universe, and then you see your tombstone, and it's like, how the heck did I die? You're questioning every logic in terms of like, what happened to me? How did I die? You're throwing all this kind of like questioning. How is the family friends reacted to all this?
Yeah, and so back to the Mordor thing. So like when he's all serious and then he brightens up, it kind of reminded me of the scene in Empire Strikes Back where Lando and Han, the first time we meet up with them, he's all serious, and then he's like, "How you doing, you old geezer, or whatever? It's good to see ya." Yeah. And then he goes, "What are you doing with my ship?" And then Han's like, "Your ship?" Yeah. Because that actually would have been kind of a nice little callback almost, to where he plays along with it, and then he's like, "Oh, I just came here, because we got to get some answers." And then Mordo's like, "What have you done with my relic?" And then Doctor Strange is like, "Your relic? Hey, remember, you lost it to me fair and square."
True, but again,
it kind of reminded me of that, but they didn't completely rip it off, which I did like.
No, yeah, because that would have been a lot more weird in a sense. But anyways, but they did talk about how like he's like guarding the dark realm book. Yeah. But it's more of kind of like in a safe or like a confinement basically, versus him actually having it like on his side basically.
Yeah. So he's talking with them about all this. And then he ends up putting something in the tea, which knocks them out. Yep. Because he's going to take them to a secret organization.
Yep, definitely. In that universe, basically. And then that's when we get the dream off sequence of her, trying to take control, of Wanda, trying to take control of the other Wanda. And then the stabbing and all that stuff.
Then the stabbing of the book. And the survivor who ends up stabbing the book, she gets, like, burnt crisp. Yeah. And turns to ash. Mm-hmm. And then Wanda's like threatening to kill the other survivors, including a Minotaur. There's a Minotaur character in this movie.
Yeah, because it is a student or something like that of the sorcerer. Because she knows that she needs to find the other book, basically, or she needs to go, any other like alternative source, so that way she can dream walk again, basically.
Yeah, and then Wong's like, there is another source, and I will take you to it. Just don't kill the other students.
Yeah, basically, she played the whole, like, I'm not going to kill you because I still need to, where I need to go. So I'm just going to threaten the others' lives so that way you could take me to it. And he said that was just a copy. I'll take you to the original source.
So yeah, that kind of made me question, are there more copies of the Darkhold?
There... Definitely. I mean, there's definitely more copies, but I'm pretty sure,
within the Prime universe, were there more copies?
Yeah, but of course, when we'll get to it at the end about all the other, because there's definitely was a lot more copies in different universes. Probably is. But, again, because there's other Doctor Stranges or different Wandas, but most Wandas in different universes, since she had the kids, she didn't need to go too far, basically, with her powers.
Yeah.
Which what we saw in the Wanda that became getting possessed by MCU's Wanda, that, she already had her kids. What more she needs to go into the, further her power? She just wanted to sit down and relax, basically, for once.
Yeah. So she goes to this original source, which is this tower in the middle of snowy mountains.
Yep.
And this tower, it looks like it was taken out of the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
You mean like Mordor or something like that?
Yeah, it looks like a mix of Barad-dûr and Orthanc, the towers of Sauron and Saruman.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, this looks a lot like Lord of the Rings.
And then, of course, demonic creatures came out of nowhere after the last fire went up, and then they kind of bowed to the Scarlet Witch because it was her, you could say, sanctuary.
Yeah, and so basically she kind of has the demons kind of drive Wong off the mountain.
It was more of her actually kind of flings him off the mountain rather than them flinging him off the mountain.
Yeah.
She flings him off the mountains.
Yeah, so she starts doing her magic, and she's going to try and redo this so she can repossess the other Wanda. But before we get to that, so then Doctor Strange and American Chavez, they wake up in these cells, these thick glass cells.
Yeah, but it was more like a testing type of thing. Or a confinement, basically, like a cell, yeah. And they have, these basically kind of like cuffs on them, magnetic cuffs, basically, which also constrain their powers.
Yeah, neutralized his powers, their energy cuffs. And that's when we meet another version of Christine.
The more scientist, the more basically, instead of being, just a regular nurse or anything like that, she's kind of took it a step above, and now she's become basically the head scientist of that universe, basically.
Yeah, and so she explains that the relationship between her and Strange didn't exactly work out.
Well, because, again, they didn't really quite sure. And, of course, Doctor Strange went, well, yeah, I can know how that, I know that feeling.
Yeah. So then, Mordo comes in, and he's like, it's time to meet the Illuminati.
The Illumina what?
Yeah, and I'm like, I know who the Illuminati are. I've heard about these characters in the comics. Although the membership is kind of different. This is like the MCU's version, but they still retain a little bit of the original.
They did a little bit, but still the idea is still the same. Where it's a bunch of these guys, heroes, maybe a little bit villains, but either way, it's more heroes, but they will do what it needs to be done, basically.
They'll do whatever it takes to see their goals accomplished. And so they have these Ultron bots take Doctor Strange to the Illuminati courtroom.
Yep.
And as for the members of the Illuminati, the first one we see is Captain Carter from What If.
Well, you also before Carter, it was him. He was a member too.
Yeah, because in the comics, Doctor Strange is a member of the Illuminati.
Yep, but since since Doctor Strange's dead, so the next Sorcerer Supreme, which is him, you could almost say he's more of an enforcer, basically, as well, to the Illuminati members as well, then we get to see Captain Carter, then Black Adam,
Black Bolt.
Black Bolt,
who's the leader of the Inhumans, and we did see him in the Inhumans TV show.
Yep.
That TV show sucks, by the way. It's not very good.
Yeah.
Because I saw the pilot of it. Didn't want to watch the rest of it.
But yeah, we see Black Bolt. Then we see the other Captain Marvel or something like that.
Yeah, an alternative Captain Marvel, where Carol Danvers didn't become Captain Marvel. It was her friend that became that.
Yep. And then, of course, we see...
This was the big one, and this one I really liked. Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four.
Yep.
And they got John Krasinski to play him, and I'm like, yes! Because I was advocating for that. And I'm like, where's my Fantastic Four reboot?
And we'll see about... they will get the Fantastic Four reboot, and he probably will still play as, Richard right there. He will probably still play as him, but just, 616.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind if they did the origin of the Fantastic Four again in the reboot. Just do it well. Yeah. I know we've gotten it before, but it's do it well, because I don't know if the Fantastic Four origin is that well known compared to other heroes.
No, because especially since... Well, they were kind of one of the lower tier of the like a Team B type of tier of Marvel, and also
low B tier. They were one of the highlights of the '60s and much of Marvel Comics history.
They were, but again, after 03's, Fantastic Four,
it was 05's.
05, they kind of were thrown into that tier B type of superheroes after.
The movies kind of gave the characters a bad reputation.
Yeah.
And it hurt their image.
Yeah.
So it's and there's also, they imply that Reed Richards has his family, which is a thing in the comics. We know that Susan Storm exists,
Yeah.
Which, by the way, they need to cast Emily Blunt because she's married to John Krasinski in real life. So if they do that, there'd be a really good dynamic in the movie.
Yeah.
But who are they going to cast as Human Torch in The Thing?
That will be a good question because I remember in 2005 it was Evans who did it originally as
Chris Evans, and that was before he matured and became Captain America.
Yep.
That was more of his like fun younger side.
Yep.
And we've seen how Chris Evans has matured over the years.
Yeah, definitely, especially after his role as Captain America.
Yeah. And so basically one of the big member of the Illuminati is Patrick Stewart.
Charles Xavier, yep.
Yeah, we get to see an older Professor X.
Yep.
And when I heard this was going to be in the movie, because this wasn't much of a spoiler, they like gave it away in the
They
trailer.
kind of did gave it away. Not so much the other members, it was more of him. You could almost feel like he was sort of like the head, basically.
Yeah, and so I was concerned they were going to somehow connect the 20th Century Fox franchise to this somehow, but thankfully they didn't do that because this Professor X is different from the one we see in 20th Century Fox.
Definitely. I think this one's a little bit more arrogant, but I think a lot of the members were pretty much arrogant. But he was still him, but he did play a little arrogant.
Yeah, and it was nice to see his robotic wheelchair.
Yep.
And they played the 90s X-Men theme from the cartoon. There's like a little note of that in there,
Yep.
which I'm sure a ton of X-Men fans are going to like.
Yep. And then he got to explain what really happened to their Doctor Strange and why they view Doctor Strange as a bigger threat rather than Wanda.
Yeah, go on, explain this.
Yep. So they kind of view Doctor Strange as a threat because their Doctor Strange was the one that took hold of the dark book, basically.
Yeah, he got a hold of the Darkhold and it corrupted him.
Which again, and they corrupted him, which they used to kill Thanos. But again, since he's the one that got corrupted, they kind of realized that he would become a villain. They killed him right away. Black Bolt just kind of said he's sorry and dead.
Yeah, and basically we see on Titan like a dead Thanos.
Yep.
Like they took the fight, and I'm guessing the Avengers were not involved because there's no evidence of that.
They probably were, but there probably were some casualties because they did talk about how, while Doctor Strange was going, doing his own thing, they fought against Thanos, and I guess the fight wasn't too well in their favor initially until he came back. Since he had the dark hole, into his possession finally. Him, while he was still being probably good at the time, him and the other Illuminati members went up against Thanos, killed him, and of course he kind of was just like he had to basically like lower his own guns, give up everything, and have Black Bolt kill him via speaking.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe the Avengers don't exist in this universe and it's just the Illuminati. Like, what if it's just that?
It could be that just because, again, Thanos was presented as a threat, a universal threat. So there could have been a possibility of that Thanos beating the crap out of every other Avengers, of that universe, and only those guys remaining. But we don't know that. Especially, and also, too, their Wanda was still alive and happily with her kids, basically.
Well, I think the point I'm trying to make is in Spider-Man No Way Home, they established, and we already know this, that the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man and the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man do not have the Avengers.
Nope.
I can understand why, because Sony didn't have the rights to all the characters and stuff. So I'm just thinking, like, what if it's just the Illuminati and not the Avengers?
That could be, again, that could still be the case per se, especially with Captain Carter being, there, so they're unlikely it was a Captain America, basically. Iron Man, I don't know, what happened with that Iron Man, basically, so we don't know, like, a few certain things that what could have happened, basically.
Oh, I gotta talk about Iron Man, actually, because there was speculation that we could have seen Tom Cruise as Iron Man in this movie.
Yep.
Because he was the original choice before Robert Downey Jr. was cast as Iron Man.
Yeah.
It was him and Nicolas Cage, which there was speculation we could see alternate versions of Iron Man, but I'm guessing due to budget constraints and pandemic constraints, they couldn't do that.
I would say a little bit more budget constraint in terms of this one, rather than, I don't know about COVID and stuff like that. I know, like, a couple of years down the road, but I could see a lot more budget or something like that to where it's like, I don't know if they could be able to do too much, and the storyline would make it a little bit harder, especially with the rumors being that this version of Iron Man would have been more villainous.
And had they actually introduced the Tom Cruise Iron Man, he probably would have been like, I need to do my own stunts.
Yeah.
And somehow he would have gotten Scientology involved because he is a Scientologist.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know if he would have done that. But that actually would have been funny to watch the Tom Cruise Iron Man go up against the Cyclos from Battlefield Earth. And John Travolta comes in dressed as the main Cyclo and they have a battle.
Yeah.
That'd be so cheesy, but I would love it.
Yeah, but again, probably some things were interfering with that one. And again, if he were to be in it and it would have been more villainous, that would have been conflicting with Wanda being more of a villain in this movie.
And that was another thing I wanted to bring up about the cameos is that a lot of fans speculated of what we were going to see in this movie because it's all multiverse. The thing is, though, is that non-MCU movies, they're not like... If Disney was to use footage, they would have to pay the other studios a royalty to use said footage.
Yeah.
So trust me, you're not going to see Nicolas Cage Ghost Rider in this. You're not going to see Ang Lee's Hulk. You're not going to see earlier versions of the Fantastic Four.
Or X-Men to a degree.
Yeah, and you're not going to see Man-Thing, which that's really obscure, by the way. There was a Man-Thing movie, but a lot of people don't know about that.
I think Deadpool was also another thing too. Although I know, like at least Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, I had a coworker who speculated Deadpool might show up in this movie,
and also did see Blade and Blade being involved, but I think he's later down the road.
Yeah, Blade had a cameo in Eternals, by the way, which we don't see him, but you hear him talk in one of the post credits. And Blade is coming, and is Deadpool. And then, what other alternative versions? Oh, we would have not seen the Josh Trank Fantastic Four because, let's face it, nobody wants to see that again.
And I believe Wolverine, also, again, X-Men, going back to that one to a degree.
Yeah, there was going to be speculation of Wolverine. I also kind of me and my coworker speculated we would have seen Tobey Maguire again as Spider-Man because Sam Raimi's directing this.
Oh, yep.
But after seeing this movie, I'm like, I don't really know how Tobey Maguire would have fit into all of this.
Well, I did see a rumor that he would have died, which at some point, seeing this movie again, that could have been... I mean, I could see one scene, but I'm glad that he didn't really die, because I kind of viewed him as the best Spider-Man. Sorry, Tom Holland and Andrew Garfield, but...
I like Tobey Maguire, too. He's my favorite, but I also like Tom Holland.
Yep.
And Garfield... Not a big fan of him, but I guess I can't really, rag on the guy too much because he went through a lot with those movies.
Yeah, he did, but he also had a really good kind of like comeback with No Way Home.
Yeah, which by the way, fans are advocating for an Amazing Spider-Man 3 and a Spider-Man 4, but I'm like, I really don't want to see that because to me those ended a while ago. Yeah. Why bring them back?
The kind of like put a conclusion basically.
Yeah, but it's like there's other superhero franchises where why would you want to bring them back when they ended a long time ago? Because Michael Keaton's going to be Batman again.
Yeah. And
it's like, I don't really know if I want to see that.
And again, this is more of like trying to finish off a story, basically, of that version Spider-Man.
I mean, they could still do it in like another medium, like a comic book or an animated thing or a video game if they wanted to.
True, but it's like getting that closure, basically, with that certain actor and all the cast right there. Here, kind of like how, we don't want to get into too much speculations here with, Johnny Depp in that situation, but how he wanted initially closure with all of his characters that he, got botched from.
I actually heard Johnny Depp's not going to work with Disney anymore.
Well, no, he did stated that. He legitimately did stated that, though. He wanted closure, but after what Disney did to, basically kind of cut all ties with him because of the speculation, he kind of just, didn't want to work with Disney anymore. But he's saddened just because, at the same time, because he wanted closure with Captain Jack Sparrow. He wanted that one last goodbye, or with some of the other characters, basically.
Well, Disney's probably going to continue Pirates without Johnny Depp, and it's not going to be the same without him.
It's definitely not going to be the same. Especially, again, especially with Pirates of the Caribbean, if you're going to continue on, at least give Johnny Depp at least Captain Jack Sparrow one last goodbye. A proper goodbye.
Yeah, like, how in Logan, when, they kill him off at the end, but that was, a very proper goodbye, because he's been doing this for so long, and we have to let him go.
Yeah, and that he can't live forever, basically. He's going to be kind of like aging and then dying, or he's going to die like he would normally be going down, which he did in Logan.
Yeah, but anyway, we've kind of rambled on a bit.
Yep.
So, the Illuminati, they talk about how they want to handle Doctor Strange, like what they want to do with this variant.
Yep.
And Professor X is the one that has the most faith in him, but the other members are like
very, very shaky, especially both.
It was Mr. Fantastic. He had some issue. He had
questionings basically, but he could have been swayed like Xavier. Captain Carter was mid, right there. I kind of think it was Stewart. Xavier had the most faith. It probably would have been Richard, who probably would have been like on the more towards believing in him. He would have been questioning, but he probably would have gone with Xavier. But it was the three other members. Well, mainly the two, but Captain Carter would have been middle. Probably would have been not trusting, but again, knowing her role as Captain Carter, or being like that Captain America type morale or like morals, probably would have gone with the Xavier and Richard, vote. It's the two that I know would have said kill him. It would the variant of Captain Marvel.
Oh, I can definitely see her.
She would have been the one. Yeah, she would have been the one killing. She would have been the one that wanted to kill Strange. Especially her arrogance level was like at almost all-time high, and the Sorcerer of that universe as well, Sorcerer Supreme.
Yeah.
Of that universe. Yeah.
But that scene was actually very well done. I like how we're considering all these options, yet they didn't really come to a definitive decision.
Well, because it was disrupted by the Scarlet Witch, basically invading.
Yeah,
which they kind of discredited until she made her present. But Doctor Strange was like, well, yeah, no, bleep, genius, because I warned you about her. You guys didn't believe me.
Yeah, and the other thing too is like with the Illuminati not coming with a decision, it's kind of similar to like the Justice League where they all come together to discuss should we kick someone out of the team, and it's like we don't really know if their final decision, because in Justice League Star-Crossed, Hawkgirl basically betrayed the entire team to the Thanagarians.
Oh yeah,
and
her people. Yep.
Yeah, at the end they're speculating of should we keep her, should we not keep her. Wonder Woman wants her off the team.
Yep.
Because there's trust issues, which eventually get repaired by Justice League Unlimited. Yep. The Flash is like, let's keep her on because there was a brother-sister dynamic between the two.
Yep.
And then Green Lantern obviously wants to keep her because they love each other.
Yep.
And then Superman's kind of And then Batman would have been like
Batman would have been but he would have probably still had faith in her. Superman would have been the same thing as well. Iffy, but still had faith in her. John would have had faith in her. It would have been John, Flash, that would have been on the yay. Wonder would have been, John, Flash, and Green Lantern would have been yay. Wonder would have been more nay. Batman and Superman would have been speculative, but probably would have been more yay, basically. So it would have been the one odd man out being Wonder Woman, basically. That would have been more nay.
Yeah, and then so she eventually meets up with them, and then she doesn't really want to hear the decision. And then they conclude all that storyline by Justice League Unlimited. And then in Justice League Doom, the League's discussing should we keep Batman on the team after his plans of how to incapacitate us got out.
That one, it would have been a little bit more towards more nays than yay. Wonder Woman, again, would have been more nay. Green Lantern suddenly would have been more nay. Superman and John, would have been more yays. Flash would have been on the mix in between, basically. Cyborg, he was brought in. He wanted out, but of course, since he was also in terms of comics, the original members of the Justice League, he was throwing into the discussion. He would have been more on the Flash, but more because of I didn't want to vote. I was just a visitor. But since he played part of the Justice League, he became basically that, kind of like, well, you fought with us. You are automatically part of the Justice League as a member, basically.
Yeah, so the Illuminati scene, it's like that, but not entirely. It just reminded me a lot of what we've seen in Justice League.
Yeah, but again, going back to the DC one with Batman and Hawkgirl, they both didn't want to hear the conclusion. They both were like, if you're basically how Batman said it in Justice League Doom, if you guys are going to discuss about if I'm a member or not, I'm out.
Yeah,
his reasoning was more of because of power, checking, basically. While her was more of just like, there's going to be... I know this.
Yeah, and in Justice League Unlimited, you still feel the tension, which they eventually do resolve as the series goes on.
Yeah.
And so, like, with Batman, he was always more of a part-timer, really, because in Batman Beyond, they established that he was a part-timer. He wasn't really much of a joiner.
No, not like an official member, but as a part-timer, because he does his own thing, basically. And that's kind of his whole thing, is he does his own thing, but if he needs a team, yes, he can call them up, basically.
So, yeah, it was very similar. So after they do the decision scene where they're talking about what to do with Strange, Wanda eventually comes in.
And starts making a havoc, basically. Well, they didn't make up their decision, basically. It was kind of like, again, halted because Wanda was attacking, basically, and was going after America Chavez.
Yeah, and this attack sequence was probably the most graphic thing in the movie. Because we see, like, she's
ripping apart all these different Ultrons, basically, and she's pursuing, basically, getting to where America Chavez was being held at. And, of course, the rest of the Illuminati, besides Charles Xavier, because, he's on the wheelchair.
Yeah, and so, like, she attacks Black Bolt first, because he's, like, very powerful. She sews his mouth shut, and when she does that, it kind of looks like the poster of the Silent Hill movie, where the character's, like, mouth is completely sewn shut. It's, like, really freaky looking.
Well, I mean, I don't know who she would have attacked at first, per se, had Keith did announce.
Well, actually, maybe Black Bolt was one of the most powerful. I know Captain Marvel's very powerful.
Well, he was powerful because he could talk, basically. Well, his talk was able to kind of like...
Yeah, it's like
breaking the sound barrier, basically, and all that sort of stuff. It's so massive, basically, that he can be able to, like, destroy a lot of things just by his voice alone, basically. So at that point with him, I mean, again, Keith, Richard explained what he could do, which Wanda was like, what do you mean by his mouth? And it just...
Yeah, and it's, like, all gone. And then she, like, crushes his brain.
No, it wasn't him crushing... She didn't crush his brain. Because, again, think of it as, like, a barrier, basically, kind of like the vocalization. You know how, like, something needs to get out of there. So imagine something hitting something and then bouncing back. So what happened was, he tried to speak, but since it hit the wall, it bounces back, thus blowing up his brain. So that's what happened. It's not so much she crushed his brain, it's more of, since she sewed it like completely shut, the sound barrier could have, it bounced backwards, thus blowing his brains out. So he kind of killed himself, but basically kind of screaming, basically.
Well, I swear it looked like a brain crush, but it looked kind of liquidy almost. And then I get the impression that had this movie been rated R, we would have seen it splatter out, and we would have seen a ton of
I think it would have
blood.
been a lot more, kind of like, the head kind of like explode to a degree a little bit, but a lot more blood and like brain parts would have been noticeable had it been rated R.
Yeah. And then with Reed Richards, she, like, does this magic thing where she, like, rips into little pieces,
like a spaghetti noodles, basically.
Yeah, and it kind of reminded me of that line Jafar makes in Aladdin, where he goes, "Things are unraveling fast now, boy," and then the magic carpet falls to noodles and stuff. It's like that.
Yeah.
But it also reminded me of this scene in There's an episode of Batman Beyond where they have parodies of the Fantastic Four, and the stretchy guy, the 2D man, he gets lifted in the air, he goes up to an air vent, and it sounds like he's getting shredded into noodles. You don't actually see that, but it sounds like that.
So that's the weakness of almost every superhero or any type of hero that has that stretchy ability. You can get stretched too far, and then you will die.
Yeah. And then with, like, Captain Carter... They have a fight, and it's really it's really cool kind of seeing all these women smack down and have this entire arena as their playground.
Captain Carter and
Captain Marvel.
Captain Marvel, that variant, against Wanda, basically, or at least the Scarlet Witch at that point. And it was Marvel was throwing out for a brief bit, kind of like not push out of the ring. So then it was 1-on-1 with Wanda against Captain Carter, which she loses in like 10 seconds, basically, of the fight.
Yeah, and Captain Carter, as she's fighting, I liked it when she said, "I could do this all day." Yeah. I like that. It was a nice callback to, like, earlier movies.
Especially to more of Captain America type of thing. I can do this all day.
Which reminds me, is this version of Captain Carter the one we see in What If, or is this a different variant? Because if this is the one we see in What If...
I think this is more of a different variant of Captain Carter, basically. I want to say this is a different one. I mean, I want to say it's the What If one, but I don't think so.
Yeah, actually, I did rewatch the zombie episode, because I heard kind of speculation the zombie episode ties into this. sort of got that, but we'll get into that.
Yeah.
So anyway, then she throws the shield, but then
Yeah.
Wanda like kind of redirects it at her, and then
Yep, cuts her in half. She catches it and throws it right back at a faster pace. Cuts her in half.
yeah, we don't actually see this where she gets cut in half.
No, but you can kind of tell that she did get cut in half. A, by her kind of like falling down this way, and B, when the shield landed, blood was on the shield.
Yeah, and then Captain Marvel has her fight, and then she ends up getting crushed by this like statue.
Yeah, well, by her statue, yeah. I wish I would have heard a little bit more, besides get out of my universe. I wish she would have been a little bit more angrier with her tone, basically, like, why won't you die, like, or something like that.
Yeah,
because she was arrogant at first, and that was one thing I was like, you're gonna die. I could tell, like, when she said, oh, we can handle your little witch, I was like, you're dead.
Mm. Yeah, there were some kind of line deliveries where I'm like, they should have delivered the line better, but nobody in here is a bad actor. Like, all the acting was really well
No, it
done.
was all good, but it's just like the character. It's more of that character that, I was like, okay, you're dead. Because you acted way more arrogant, basically. So, like Captain Marvel would. So it's like when she got or when she got killed, I was like, alright, that's sort of fine. But I wanted her to say something more along the line of, like, showing her arrogance, but realizing she's on the losing end, so to speak. So it's like realizing that, now you're realizing that, Doctor Strange was right about Wanda.
Yeah, so, and then, okay, so when she possesses the body of the alternative Wanda, she's like got all this blood coming down on her face, and it looks really demonic. And I like that, because like, there's a sequence later on where she's like chasing him in the tunnels and stuff.
Yep.
And it's like, she's all moving like strange and kind of contortion-y, like a demon would. Like
sort of, but it's also like injured because her leg was a little bit injured, a little bit too.
Yeah, I've seen enough horror movies where it's like you'll see the possessed characters. They're like kind of doing this, and then they speak in like that crackly voice, which that didn't happen, by the way.
No, but before that sequence happened to occur, she was going up to to take Captain or America Chavez, but Xavier came in. Uses his power.
Oh, I got to talk about this sequence.
Yep.
So, like, he does this psychic battle with Wanda, and he goes inside her mind, and it's, like, all blank white.
Yep.
And then we see this rubble, and he's walking.
Almost like an It reference, too, because of how, like, pitch black that hole was, too.
What was it a reference to? Oh, It?
You could almost say it was It just because of how, like, black that hole was, and then Wanda coming out, but instead of being the monstrosity initially, it was the kind of like that one, it was more trying to get out of there, basically. Kind of think of it as like the It version, but except like the one person that's trying to help out, instead of like the It being in there. Imagine if like the boy got stuck in there, and then It pulled it back, back in.
Yeah.
So imagine that type of sequence.
Yeah, I really didn't think of it that way.
I thought of it that way, but then of course you got a kind of like a mist vibe, basically. That kicked in too a little bit.
Yes. Yeah, so he tries to save her, and it doesn't work. And so eventually...
A red mist kind of came in.
Yeah, the red mist comes in, and then it goes quiet, and then... She, like, comes out of the mist, and, like, snatches him, and it's, like, demon-y and stuff.
More like grabbed the neck and then just cracked it.
Yeah, and this scene is... it's kind of the same thing as... I'll explain. In X-Men The Last Stand, Xavier and Jean Grey have a psychic battle.
Yep.
Now, we don't actually see anything. We don't see what's going on in their heads.
No.
We, like, see them fighting, but we're sort of imagining what's in our heads. It's up to the viewer to decide what's going on.
Yeah.
She's much stronger, because the Phoenix Force is, like, much stronger.
Yeah.
And we see her get all, like, very alien and scary looking.
Well, more demonic, too, because, again, the Phoenix is a lot powerful, basically, because it is a intense heat, basically.
Yeah, and so she lifts up Xavier from the chair, and then Magneto's like, "No, Jean! Jean!"
Yep.
And then, Wolverine's trying to get to her, he's like clawing on the ceiling.
Yep.
And then Xavier's gonna get disintegrated, and he's like, "Don't let it control you." It's like that, and I was really reminded of that sequence.
Yeah, a little bit, but again, battling with with Scarlet Witch, that is another battle in and of itself, basically, as well. Where it's like you're not dealing with the intense heat of the Phoenix, you're dealing with a witch, basically, who has immense power, basically. So, like, doing a illusionary effect, basically, can only do so much, basically. Or doing telepathic power against a witch can only do so much. Which,
Yeah.
again, at the back end, the red mist kind of came in, and once it comes into the mist, like those mist movies, once like that hero or one of the good guys, once they're stuck in the mist, they're dead. And that's what happened. He gets in the mist, he's dead.
Yeah, and that was actually one of those. There's a ton of jump scares that are actually really well done in this movie, but I wasn't terrified of them because I knew they were coming.
Yep.
And one of the criticisms of horror films is that whenever there's a jump scare, it just feels like a cheap scare. And there's quite a lot in this one.
There's also the criticism, too, of, like, you can almost see some of the jump scare before it happens, per se. One of the example being, like, Alien Covenant, basically. There was a scene where the alien and one of the hero, or one of the good characters, she kind of, like, they were basically kind of, like, standing, like, side by side, or, like, in front of each other. She didn't move. She realized that there was a noise. If she makes a sound, he jumps. And everyone knows that she's dead no matter what. Because she has to move almost as silently as possible. But, of course, you can't. Because you're going to make a sound. And the moment she backs up, it also just that little bloop or kirk. He jumps right in front of this camera screen. And, the creature jumped right at her. And from the perspective, coming right at you. So, of course, you get that jump scare type of vibe, but it's almost like the wait time. You know it's going to happen, but you just don't know when.
Yeah, and so with the jump scares, it's like Scott Derrickson has done quite a lot of these in his horror movies. Like in Sinister, for instance, Bagul has a ton of jump scares. There's one sequence where like the main character, he goes into the attic, he sees all the dead kids, and like Bagul appears in the Super 8 projector.
Yep.
Then you see him move to the side, and he's like that, and the music like goes banshee-like.
Yeah,
and then there's another jump scare at the end.
Yeah.
Which, if Scott Derrickson had still done this movie, he probably would have put a lot of jump scares in
and
there.
a lot of jump scares too. They also had that little like kind of like most of them had like the piano type of like brrr, like like how like a piano would kind of like when they kind of like abrupt they would kind of like play out play at the same time like an angry like pianos would do if they're like upset about something, they would just boom. Almost every jump scare kind of ends up like that, too, in this type of film.
Yeah, or the music just screams like a banshee.
Yeah.
But regarding the Xavier death, I felt more loss about him in X-Men The Last Stand than I did here.
Well, yeah, definitely, because this Xavier... Because it almost kind of showed up he was going to die, and I was like, he did show his little bit arrogance. I felt that way at first, but then I was like, okay, at least he had faith in Doctor Strange. This version of Doctor Strange... And then he still played a little bit arrogant, unlike the other ones. So, other members of the Illuminati were way more arrogant than he was, for sure.
Yeah. And then Mordo actually shows up at this meeting, because he's a part of the Illuminati. He takes Doctor Strange's place.
Yeah.
And so, like, he does get a fight sequence, because his decision is, I'm going to kill you, man.
Well, yeah, because, of course, Doctor Strange, because, having to deal with his... He probably figured, like, okay, this probably is no different from mine. So he played like, you probably were happy that I became corrupt and evil, and then you got to be the, Sorcerer Supreme. I bet you were just jittery with all joy and stuff like that. Because, again, he had the perspective of, well, he was mad with me in my universe. This is probably, very similar to this. So let's see. So, of course, he played at it a little bit with his anger level. And then, of course, Judgment came in. And then he was able to kind of, combat it even with restraints on. But of course, having restraints, they're still chained, so they can still block.
Yeah, so he eventually gets the chains free from him, and then they have their little fight sequence.
Yep.
And then he gets thrown into like a ditch.
No, they throw each other to the ditch, basically, or kind of off this little thing, because they chain each other, then they kind of flung each other off the ditch, breaking the chains. They still can't use the power per se because it's still sort of active. But they are free in a sense, though.
Yeah, and then after he gets defeated, Strange runs away, and then we never see Mordo again in the rest of the movie.
Well, no, because he's kind of he has to get himself out of there, basically. So it's like, he's going to be trapped down there for a little bit.
So, yeah. What happens next? So, Scarlet Witch, she goes after American Chavez in the glass case.
Chavez, Christine were running off, then they kind of reunited with,
Stephen Strange, and then they're running through the tunnels, and then she's acting all scary and possessed.
Because they were trying to get to the one little tunnelway, which was basically the shortcut, or at least that the closest path to the book that they were, that was seen in the beginning of the film, basically.
Yeah, and so they eventually reach the gateway to this alternate dimension, and when they open the door, it's like this really cool moment where it like shines the light,
Yep.
and they're all looking at it in wonder. They're like, and so they go in,
Yep.
and then they basically like get the book.
But of course, Wanda was there.
Yeah, and she ends up destroying it. So they're going to need a new alternative method.
Well, they destroyed the book, but again, she flung, she used America Chavez power. She flung both Christine and Doctor Strange down a portal.
Yeah, and then she snatches America Chavez, and she's going to get her into her little tower.
Well, she kind of redirected the dimension to where she was originally located, flung American Chav, to her, then broke off the connection between that Wanda and herself, basically. And then, of course, closing the portal too, and then, of course, that Wanda went to go back to her kids. Meanwhile, our Wanda, Scarlet Witch, is now like, okay, now time to take your power.
Yeah. She unpossesses her, and then she gets in, go back to the kids.
Yeah.
And then does she drain America Chavez's power for? I forget what the reason was again. What was it?
She's trying to drain America Chavez's power so that way she could jump into the other, that other universe to where she can just be with her kids. Whenever that's her whole goal.
Yeah. I am sorry if I'm not memorizing all the details very well. This is the first time I've seen it. I need to rewatch this again. When it gets on Disney Plus, I'll probably rewatch it again. But anyway, so Christine and Strange, they go back to their reality, right?
Not their reality. They went to a different universe.
Oh, yeah. I got confused.
Yeah, they got back to this. They went to another universe to where that universe had a major incursion, basically. Very much so, because remember, the whole New York still was basically, Inception, but more corrupt and more kind of like, basically the whole space and dimension was just so corrupted, basically, it got so twisted that, the incursion basically happened, and it was just basically doomsday across the board.
Yeah, it looked really really apocalyptic, and then they eventually find another sanctorium.
Yep.
And they see someone in the window. It's another Strange variant.
Yep.
So he goes in there, and then he sees this stairway that goes into the clouds and stuff. Yep. That was really cool.
Also, blood moon in the back there as well. I don't know if you noticed, it was a blood moon a little bit in the back while he was walking up the stairs. Basically, it was a little bit of a blood moon.
I don't think I saw that. I gotta watch the movie again. And so basically, he goes up there, and then there's this variant called Sinister Strange, who's possessed by the Darkhold.
Yep.
You want to explain this bit?
That one, because that Doctor Strange did get possession of the Darkhold, basically, which, again, why the Illuminati were so fearful of Doctor Strange to begin with, basically. But again, this one, because he reverted back to the question, that was basically played across the whole movie. Are you happy? And of course, like he said, how like in the movie beginning, it's like, oh yes, of course. That one, said that he goes back to, the sanctuary and was like, why did I lie to myself? And probably you can kind of see this in our Doctor Strange, to where it's like, he kind of felt that same way too. He probably did lie to himself about what he said to Christine, or at least hit Christine at the wedding, basically.
Yeah, and the theme of "Are you happy with the universe you're in?" This was actually a theme that I actually really liked. Yeah. Because Strange, he's still got these feelings for Christine, and maybe in another universe they get together, which I'm sure that happens.
I don't know, because again, that Doctor Strange, the one that got hold of the Darkhold, he said every other universes that I have ever seen, they're still the same. I can never get her. And in the What If, it played out that same thing.
So she dies. It's like an absolute point. You can't change it no matter what you do.
You can't change it. Or something like that too. And it's just like no matter what he does, he can never get her, basically.
Oh, I knew they were going to reference that episode in this movie somehow.
Kind of, basically. It's not really much like a direct point, but it was more of kind of like that message of kind of like how the character said, to Doctor Strange right next to him, basically. Hey, you're the best doctor, you're the best of this, and all that sort of stuff. You got everything you want, except for the girl.
Yeah, and with Sinister Strange, there's a scene in the trailer, they actually cut it. It's the scene where the camera pans up,
Yeah.
We see him all sinister, and then he's like, well, things just got out of hand. Like, that wasn't in the movie. Why'd they cut that?
Don't know. I feel like that would have been something along the line, like a different route, or if they would have done something else. But that, I guess with how the movie played out, that would not have fit well in the movie, which is why they probably cut that out.
Yeah, because when we saw Spider-Man No Way Home, there was a small teaser for Doctor Strange 2 at the end. And as soon as I saw that scene, I was like really terrified of what this guy's capable of.
Yeah, because you thought in the trailers it would have been like this other variant Doctor Strange that would have been the main villain, or something else would have been the main villain instead of Wanda.
Yeah, because there was kind of when Scott Derrickson was originally attached to this, he wanted to introduce the villain Nightmare in this movie, or maybe hint at Mephisto.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's true, but they didn't really go ahead with that.
Yeah.
I do not mind Wanda being the villain, though, because I really liked the way they handled that.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to the Sinister Strange thing.
So back to the Sinister. So he kept talking to Strange about, but before that he wanted to ask him, like, prove that you're another version of me, in which they brought up, the sister's death. But then they kind of, like, talk about how, like, again, how their feelings toward Christine, and how he kind of, like, his reason of taking hold of the Darkhold kind of made him corrupt. And of course, caused his universe to get such much of incursion that it's like, well, there's nothing I could do. So then he said, I did what I did the other Stephen Strange a favor, basically. And then he told Doctor Strange, you ever had that dream of falling, from like a very high place? Doctor Strange kind of was like, he had the reaction of, yeah, what about that? Like, he kind of had a sudden realization. Then, of course, Sinister Strange, this one goes, that was probably me. And then, of course, the eye kind of pops up.
Oh, yeah, the third eye. That was a really frightening visual, actually.
Because, again, with using dark, powers, or basically like, you're using forbidden magic or using dark energy, of course, the eye kind of pops out. But, of course, he also was hinted at a little bit of the third eye, because that same eye spot, the ancient one did.
Oh, that was more like the symbol.
Like that's again, she plucked that as that forehead, which where the eye was at. Open your eyes, basically.
That's a nice connection, actually.
That is right there, yeah, because she did open your eyes, and she had her thumb right on that forehead, which was exactly that third eye was at too.
Oh man, the connective tissue of the MCU is brilliant.
Yep.
Anyway, so they have a fight sequence, and it's like done with musical notes.
The battle sequence did, yeah. And I would have, in this one, I've talked to some of my coworkers, I would have loved for a little bit more other battle themes while they were doing, like, that battle notes.
Yeah, because you, like, hearing the music, like that stereotypical Halloween music they play.
The Halloween, yeah, with the more scary, but I would have done, like, a little bit more, like, other battle themes, like, a different movies, stuff like that. Kind of like, for example, imagine, like, during the movie sequence, you had Duel of Fates for like a snippet, basically.
Well, yeah, because Disney owns Star Wars now.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, imagine something like a battle sequence, a musical note playing a little bit of a Duel of Fates, or a Pirates of the Caribbean duel sequence, or something like that, where like different battle music notes kind of took in a little bit.
Yeah, and like Danny Elfman was the composer of this. Yeah. He could have maybe put a little hint of the Spider-Man theme in there.
Probably could have also, maybe, not too sure. But again, different battle music would have been nice during the battle sequence a little bit as well. To kind of throw off all like this musical battle, basically.
Yeah, and like, I mean, there's other things they could have done, but it was actually kind of creative.
It was creative, definitely, that is for sure. Having musical notes as a battle, basically, in a different way.
Yeah. So eventually he defeats Sinister Strange, and then he gets a hold of the Darkhold.
Yep.
And so he's like, I'm going to have to use this to defeat the bad guy.
Yep, and Christine did say that all your strangers are the same, and it's like, yeah, maybe so.
We're all egotistical, but we got to do what it takes to defeat the evil.
Do what it takes, what it needs to be done, basically.
Yeah.
And in this case, having to go back and dreamwalk and fight Wanda in his universe. But of course, the question was brought up of, well, if you need the dreamwalk, doesn't you have to be in that universe? But since you're here, how are you going to get back there? Luckily enough, the very body of the Defender Strange was still there.
Yeah, he like thought of that. And then there's like these specters that come out, and they talk in like freaky demonic voices.
Well, yeah, because again, you are dealing with forbidden magic. It's necromancy, basically, which is a forbidden magic in almost every sort of every sort of like medieval, every sort of like anything in form of magic. Any form of necromancy is a forbidden magic, which she did basically was a forbidden magic, necromancy. He brought back the dead.
Yeah.
Which in this case, his own variant, or at least he possessed his own dead variant.
Yeah, and the dead variant, it looked like the What If zombies almost. Because like you see the skin is sloughing off in like 2-pound chunks.
Yeah,
and you can see a little flesh. And so he basically fights through these little specter demons.
Well, they kind of were winning, but then also she brought back the idea of you're the sorcerer supreme. You know, you have all this magic. They're spirits. Use them basically, and it's like, oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so he gets a hold of them.
Yep.
And then that's how he can control them to possess this other variant.
Yep.
And so we cut back to Wanda, who's almost in the process of completing this.
Yep. And then of course he comes in, and then of course Wong kind of like
Wong's still on the edge. He like gets a whip and then flings one of those demons off.
Or he kind of stabs to the head basically, and then of course Doctor Strange comes in, blows the other three off. Wong was climbing back up, and of course Wanda climbing back up. Wanda calls him a hypocrite, and it's like, yeah, maybe so, but you know, again, it's gonna take Now this time it's because he's now possessing a dead corpse, like he said. It's gonna take more of killing me to kill me, basically. Because
yeah,
it's like,
that was a line of it's gonna take more than killing me to kill me, and I'm like, I kind of would have written that more differently.
Probably, but at the same time, it makes sense because not only that she's fighting, you know, him dream walking basically per se, but it is a dead corpse. So this is like, okay, this is a zombie, not just a zombie basically. So you can't kill him once basically, but this is a reanimated zombie from a different Strange. So you have to not only kill the body or blow up the body per se, but then you have to also kill the original connector basically per se.
Yeah, and he does that sequence where he's like got all these hands in the air and stuff, like we saw in Infinity War.
Yep.
Now, when I saw that originally, I actually thought that was maybe the villain Nightmare or some other villain, but no, it's not actually that.
Yeah, no, it's just him in possession, basically.
So they have this fight sequence, and then all the demons come out, and they see, like, and they are all talking to Wanda and scaring her.
It's more of him flinging all those demonic creatures, since he's now in control, fling them at her, and it's basically, again, that whole entail of fighting fire with fire. Now you're throwing a dark, you know, this is more of dark versus dark, basically. Now you're flinging necromancy at a witch, basically.
Yeah, it was like a battle of the sorcery.
Battle of dark sorcery, basically. It's a witch who uses demonic versus a sorcerer who now is tapping into more demonic, basically, or necromancy.
Yeah, and then, so basically, they open up the alternate dimension portal with the kids and the alternative Wanda.
But before that, though, he did go to America Chavez, and again,
he basically tells her, "You can do this. You just got to get control of your power." And she's like, "I can't do it.
Yeah, but first they thought that Strange was going to take her power, basically, because they thought it's no other way. Connecting ties to all, like he said in Infinity War, there was no other way. There's no other way. But he's like, nah, there's another way, and told America Chavez, you can control your power. You've been doing this, and yet you're frightened, you're emotional, but use that emotion, control it, and you can fight her, basically. Which she did.
Yeah, it's kind of cliche, really, where it's like they encourage the heroes, you can do this and stuff, and then they like get
the motivation and stuff like that to do it. Yeah. But of course, again, it still wasn't enough to beat her, because of course, her alone, being a novice, basically, even with kind of like gaining even emotionally control, she's still no match for the Scarlet Witch. And the only way to kind of like bring her to her senses is what she did. I can't defeat you, but I will give you what you want.
So she opens up a portal, and like we get to see the kids, but they're all terrified of the witch because they kind of know what happened almost.
They kind of figure, basically, because it's probably that same universe still that, you know, she kept going back to and possessing their mother, basically.
Yeah.
So again, because that place was still a mess, basically. And of course, you know, she portals back in, and then she's like, what? Like, kids? And all of a sudden they see her, all in that Scarlet Witch stuff, And they run, saying she's a monster, basically. And of course, that Wanda comes down the stairs saying, it's alright, it's alright. Scarlet throws her across the room. And then, she's throwing stuff. The kids are throwing stuff at at Wanda, or Scarlet Witch. Telling them stop. And then she's trying to calm them down, saying, I'm not a monster. But as she kept saying that, she sees, get her kids crying. And sort of that way, don't hurt, don't hurt people. And then she started to realize she's taking it back now of seeing not just, the kids crying, but herself, the other version of herself, hurt. Because she said, I will never hurt anybody. I wouldn't. And then she stopped and then she sees kids crying, house destroyed, her other self hurt, and now she realizing her errors of her ways.
Yeah, and her realizing the error of her ways is very similar to something in Spider-Man 2 where Dr. Octopus realizes the error of his ways.
Yeah.
And so he tries to correct it. He gets the sun device and he tears it down.
Yeah.
And he collapses with it. The same thing happens here where Scarlet Witch, she realizes, I'm the one who can stop this.
It was more, but before that though, because she kind of was taken back, and then her other self, because calmed the kids down, saying, don't worry about her, because they thought she's still a monster, but it's no, she's she's on her knees crying, and that Wanda kind of realizes, because she can see her pain and agony and sadness, and then she kind of relayed the message, just know that they will be, they will be cared for. Basically, it's I know you wanted and everything else like that, but just know that your other me, being me, is still taking care of them.
Yeah, and that was basically what snapped her out of it and realized it's kind of like a redemption arc almost.
Sort of, or more like that realization of just herself telling her it's like another vision of yourself saying, just know that in this one, I'm alright. Everything's alright.
Yeah.
Just be, just do what you can in yourself. But know that this, I'm doing well. And everyone else around you is doing well in this one.
Yeah. And so after that sequence, she basically tells everybody, you might want to get out, I gotta collapse this thing.
Well, it's more of Doctor Strange tells them to get out, basically. She's setting up for destruction of the temple, basically. So Doctor Strange was telling America Chavez, get out of there. And then, of course, her and Wong, America Chavez and Wong, gets out of there. And
yeah, they all open a portal, and then they go through there.
Yep.
And then she collapses the tower, and we don't know if she's actually dead or not.
It may show that she's dead, but because they didn't show the body per se. And like any other movie goes, they don't show the body, there's still a chance.
Yeah, but it's kind of this is the conclusion of Wanda's story almost, because where did they take her character from here?
Well, again, you still have Vision who's still running around and stuff like that, so you never know.
Yeah, we'll see what they come up with.
But in the meantime, since she did destroy the original Darkhold sanctuary, thus every other copy is now destroyed, basically, of the Darkhold.
Yeah, that way nobody can corrupt it again.
Nope, not even Doctor Strange, no Wanda, no one can get corrupted by the book.
Yeah, and as she collapses the tower, it kind of looks like the tower collapse in Lord of the Rings where Barad-dûr falls down.
Oh, yeah?
Not entirely, but it's similar.
Yeah. Then, of course, Doctor Strange, gets out of the position and was like, yep, the book is destroyed. And then he sort of has this kind of clearance, basically, with, even though it's a different universe of Christine, but he still kind of came out, basically.
Yeah.
And told her, in it doesn't matter whichever universe, he still loves her, basically.
Yeah. They get this heartfelt, moment.
Yeah.
And then they all go back to their respective universes.
Yep.
And then we see America Chavez is now a student.
Basically, yep, who was basically acting very similar to Doctor Strange, which Wong did. Kind of hinted at, basically.
Yeah, so she's still got a lot to learn.
Yep.
But what I did like about the American Chavez character was that they didn't write her in a way where she's better than everybody, she's perfect, and she's smarter than everybody right out of the gate.
No.
I like that they didn't do that. They wrote her to be more human.
Yeah.
And I like it when they do this with female characters or any character in general. It's like we need them to be relatable. We need to make them feel human, you know?
Well, in this one, and I'm gonna put this in more perspective of like Rey per se from.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up too with Rey.
But it was more of like not just because they both were like not in control of their power, but the difference in how they treat America Chavez to Rey is that America Chavez didn't control her power, but even when she kind of gained more control of it, she still wasn't as powerful as like the enemy per se. Whereas Rey, even with like not even in full like possession or full control of her power, she was somehow able to beat Kylo.
Yeah, and
Kylo Ren, or able to overcome like a lot of things for just plot armor reasoning or something like that.
Well, I can excuse that in The Force Awakens as if she got lucky.
Maybe you could excuse that from Force Awakens per se, just because Kylo Ren barely. I mean, yes, granted he has been a little bit more trained, but there's not like any other sword users that could have been, training with him or he would have been combating against per se. So maybe excuse in that department. But maybe not so much 8, but 9.
Yeah, when they brought up that force healing power, that came out of nowhere.
Yeah, 9. Yeah, that's when it gets out of nowhere. That's when it's like, okay, first of all, even with reading throughout the books, here's the thing about the force healing. It has been brought up. Force healing has been brought up in the Star Wars universe. It is not like one of those uncommon things. But you could have done that in a different way. And also the force healing thing of like transferring life to the other one, it's not really that per se, where it's like this and transferring to that. It's more of like healing and then you're good, basically. Kind of like I'm using the force ability. It's still draining the force because you're still using a force, but not like you're taking your life and putting it onto something else.
Yeah, and I mean, that strange force dyad, what was it called again?
Dyad of the force.
Oh yeah, the force dyad and that like telepathic connection they had, that was something that I didn't like that at all.
Well, I think that was more force link rather than like dyads like connecting one another and having like the same mindset, basically. I think that's more force link, and they still had that connection, basically. Whenever Snoke linked them together, but they never really like lost that connection, basically, or broke that connection. They still had that link.
Yeah, so we've kind of got on a Star Wars ramble here, but the point I'm trying to make is I didn't mind the American Chavez character. I thought she was pretty good. She had a decent balance of screen time with the other characters. Like, no other character was hogging the screen and stuff.
No, and the thing with her is more of like when she was inexperienced and didn't know her power, she was unstable with it and she was not that strong. And then even as she kind of realizes that how to control a little bit, she still wasn't quite there yet, or didn't get like that plot armor or that luckiness per se, where it's like she got now full control, but she still has a lot of ways to learn.
So yeah, I think that's how you should write your characters, is like they're like beginners, and they're going to learn more as they go on.
Yeah.
Which is something that the MCU is very good at. We introduce these characters, and as the movies go on, they learn more, and they eventually will become the people that they're meant to be.
Yeah, or like the strength that they finally will get to at the end.
Which, by the way, Captain Marvel did not do that very well.
Yeah, I know you said Marvel done a very good job of it, but they have their misses, like Captain Marvel, basically.
Yeah, that's one of their misses. And the crossover movie, The Marvels, that's going to be out next year.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. I don't know how that one's going to go. But anyway, so, like, Wong and Strange, they have a little conversation, and then Strange will eventually go back to where this sanctum is in New York.
Yeah, and the question was brought up again, are you happy? Wong kind of took it into perspective of, that's an interesting question. I take it to more of, I'm just grateful that I'm here in this universe and I'm doing whatever I can, basically, just living out my life, basically. I'm grateful for what I have right now.
Yeah, and I kind of felt like at the end of the movie, like, Steven accepts this.
Yeah.
And it's like, I went through all of this, and I'm realizing now that I think things are going to be good the way they are. If I tamper with them in any way, bad things are going to go down.
Yeah.
I don't want to do something that will, like, destroy the universe.
No, he kind of was like, because he realized that whole happiness, he thought that everything, by fixing everything or doing everything right, that he would be happy, but he realized maybe not so. But then Wong kind of like I guess, like I mentioned before, it's like I'm just grateful that I'm still here and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So he's grateful about this universe.
Yeah, and that was actually a really good theme in this movie is, are you grateful for the universe that you've lived in?
Yeah.
Because I have thought of, like, alternative timelines myself where maybe I was born in a different year and I got to see certain things that I probably should have seen.
Yeah, or something like that occur if you were born earlier or later, or whatever the case may be, how you would act, basically, in that timeline, per se.
Yeah, this is something you could think about, is, like, if you were born in a different decade, what would your life have been like?
Definitely, for sure. But
And it's something that I think a lot of people are going to be talking and thinking about.
Yeah, the big question of are you happy or are you grateful was basically the big theme of this movie. And of course, at the end, after he goes back to New York, fixes his watch, and he leaves out there, of course, like any other horror movie, it ends up with this very dramatic ending. Like
Where he's like got a headache, a painful one. Then he goes up and he's screaming in the air, ah! And then we see the third eye, like
the third eye activate, where it's like the hero screaming in pain, like any other horror film, whatever that be, like a monster that's still the same creature grabbing up at the end, or something in pain, whatever the case may be. And then with Doctor Strange, the third eye came in because it just started to wake and basically scream, and then bloop.
But the funny thing is that Sam Raimi has done this ending already in his other horror movies.
Yeah.
In Evil Dead, for instance, at the end, like, Bruce Campbell's character beats all the evil demons and stuff, and then he walks out and the sun's shining because he got through a horrible night.
Yeah.
But then there's this monster running towards him, like like we're from the perspective of it, and the camera's moving this fast.
Yeah.
And as he catches up, he turns around and goes, ah!
Yeah.
And then, like, it's like that, and it's like Raimi wanted to pay tribute almost.
Yeah.
Or at the end of Drag Me to Hell, when the main character, she realizes she didn't reverse the curse, and all the cursed hands come out of the ground, and they like pull her down and stuff like that.
Yep.
It's like Raimi's like, well, I'm a horror director, I gotta do what I gotta do.
Well, here's another thing too, which is kind of like, I was kind of questioning this too at the end. It's that sequence, and then the one other post-credits, the first post-credit scene.
Oh yeah,
where it's
we
like,
gotta talk about this.
And the first one was like, you cut off that scene, him screaming. Then all of a sudden, like a minute later, he's walking down the street fine? What? Wasn't he just in screaming in agony, and now he's just walking out fine?
Or maybe it was like a quick pain, you know, and then he got over it. Because people can get over quick headaches.
I know, but it's one of those things where it's just like, if you're screaming in agony, and even if it's gone, wouldn't you just want to be sitting somewhere for like a quick minute or something like that, or just kind of be like, oh, like, you know, something like, even after a jolt of pain, all of a sudden it's gone, you just want to sit down and just kind of like collect yourself, instead of like, oh my god, I'm in pain, and all of a sudden just like, okay, I have to go.
Yeah, and then he's like in control of the third eye.
Yeah, and like all of a sudden you're in control. I'm like, you just got this. You, like, this version, you just got this. There's no way that you be screaming in agony in one moment, then the next, like, minute, not only you're fine and collective and walking down the street, but now you're in control.
Yeah, and maybe in the third film they'll explain that.
We'll see. But then, of course, the new character kind of comes in.
Yeah, and this is actually one of Scott Derrickson's ideas that he wanted to do in the sequel that survived into this. We're introduced to Clea, and if you know your comics, she is basically a love interest to Doctor Strange.
And the successor to the Sorcerer Supreme, basically.
And they have Charlize Theron play her, and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. We're going to see her in the next movie. So she opens up a portal to the Dark Dimension.
Yep.
And then she says there's like some repercussions of what you've done.
There was another incursion, basically, that Doctor Strange, you know, did something. So she opens up the portal to the Dark Dimension, basically, and she said, are you coming or not? And then he said, okay, I'm coming.
Yeah, he like goes with it, and then and then he grows the third eye, and then they like go into the portal, which obviously is set up for the next movie.
Yep.
Which, what's the third one gonna even be about? Do they like go to the Dark Dimension and tackle Dormammu?
Probably the Dormammu or something like that, or maybe they'll probably do something in another film that may tie into Dormammu or something like that, and then they probably would have to do something later on.
Yeah, because, I mean, I do want to see the next Doctor Strange if they ever make it.
Yeah.
And I think maybe they should just make one more, because I don't know if he could go on as long as some of the other characters have.
Well, again, they said, because again, if you know your comic, Clea was the one that took the role of the Sorcerer Supreme,
kind of taking on Doctor Strange's role, basically.
Yeah, they could probably go down that route. But I admit I haven't read all the comics, so I gotta get myself up to date.
Yeah. Then, of course, at the end, which is a snippet, the second post-credits scene, which is more of just saying, hey...
I would have like, cut this out entirely, because it didn't need to be there.
No, I mean, but at the same time, because you kind of know that every director kind of figures this out, too. With every Marvel movie, since the first Avenger movie with their post-credit scene and stuff like that, they kind of figure people are going to be sitting around the theater, so they throw it at it again. Kind of like how was it in the one, I think, Spider-Man movie at the end, where Captain America was like, so you're sitting here and you thought that, there will be something like
that actually, I would have cut that too, because didn't need to be there.
Well, I was just saying that you just sat around for no reason, basically. They said, or they basically kind of did the, I got you again.
Yeah, because there's a second post-credit scene in Thor: The Dark World where he goes to visit Jane, and then we see one of the frost giant monsters chasing something. Didn't need to be there.
Yeah, I mean, that one maybe another, like, I don't know why you throw that in there. But this one's more of, I got you again. Because this was more of, like, again, going back to the, Bruce kind of, like, punching himself and stopping. And it's like, it's over. Like, it's telling you, it's done. There's no other thing.
Yeah, and I think, like, because in the Evil Dead reboots, they have him show up in a post-credit scene at the end where he says his iconic line, groovy, and then he turns to the camera. Yeah. It's kind of like that almost. Like Sam Raimi's like, oh, I like what you did. You want to do it again, but this time we're going to do something funny?
Yeah.
So that's it. And then there was nothing else, and then we left.
Yep, that was about it.
So I would say, like, this one was actually a lot of fun.
Yep.
I liked the dark and serious tone. I liked that there was very few comedy in this movie because one of my criticisms with the MCU is that they will over-rely on comedy too much when they could go more story-focused.
Some instances. There are a lot of good... There are films that they do, more serious tones. But there are, like, some films, like the Guardians of the Galaxy, that they would, take a little bit more comedy into seriousness. More comedy than seriousness, but it still plays serious.
Yeah, and I'm not saying they can't have the comedy. I'm just saying that they need to find a balance, which sometimes they don't, and sometimes they do.
Yeah. Sometimes they don't, sometimes they do. Sometimes a film is more serious than comedy. Sometimes it's more comedy than serious. Sometimes it's a balance of both comedic and seriousness.
Yeah, so, I mean, and I thought the story was, entertaining enough that it worked for what it was as a Doctor Strange movie. And I would say, yeah, this is kind of a WandaVision sequel, but this is more of a real Doctor Strange sequel with a little other things thrown in there.
I say, yes, it is a Doctor Strange film because the main protagonist is Doctor Strange. But the star of the show was Wanda because her presence throughout the entire movie, for the most part, was felt because we realized she was the one that sent all the creatures to go hunt down and capture America Chavez. To now, it's like she revealed herself being the villain. Her going to the sanctuary, to the palace, attacking the palace, and then throwing out her strength, and then dream walking twice, basically, and beating everybody up, winning basically every single battle or duel that she had, basically, with either Doctor Strange, the Sorcerer Supreme, the Illuminatis, all those stuff. She had a lot more present into that one. So it's a little bit more of what you could say a sequel to WandaVision because of her presence just being felt throughout the entire movie.
But I would say, like, they found a balance, and this movie didn't really feel overstuffed. They knew how to manage all these characters very well, because if you take the early X-Men movies that Bryan Singer did, he knew how to, like, manage all these characters and tell a story without it feeling overstuffed.
Yep.
Because one of the big mistakes with Spider-Man 3 is that it was extremely overstuffed, and they were trying to figure out how to manage all of that, but they couldn't.
Yeah.
So with this one, I would say they had a ton of things, but none of it felt very overstuffed or things didn't feel padded out. It was a nice pace.
It was definitely a nice pace for sure. But yeah, overall though, overall it's still a good movie overall.
Yeah, I would recommend go see this, but I'm pretty sure a lot of people already have because it's made a lot of money at the box office.
Definitely, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, and so I would say that this one, it's got a really good horror angle to it. I like that they took that horror angle.
Yeah.
and they actually did something with it that works. It's not terribly scary because it's kind of cheap horror almost.
Yeah, cheap horror, and there are some cliche horror elements into it, like basically a lot of the jump scares.
Yeah, but I wouldn't. But I mean, I wouldn't really get too worked up about it. It was fine enough for what it
Yeah.
was, and so I also liked the visual effects. I thought they were very well done.
Yeah.
Maybe there was a moment where I'm like, this looks a little green screened and too artificial, but I'm like, they were all very well done. I liked the acting; it was pretty good. Although there were a few lines that were delivered kind of strange. Yeah.
Yeah. Strange, yeah.
Yeah, and obviously there's teasers for the Fantastic Four, which really excited about that whenever that comes around.
Yep, definitely some teasers in terms of
There were some good themes, and I mean, it just was a very entertaining movie.
Yep.
I think it delivered. And I honestly wouldn't mind if Sam Raimi comes back for another Marvel movie. Like if he makes a third Doctor Strange movie, because that would be fun to watch what he's going to do with that.
Yeah, definitely.
Or if he ever does it. And I wouldn't mind if Sam Raimi came back and directed a new set of Spider-Man movies featuring Tom Holland, because they're talking about it. And so Tom Holland's getting older now, and you could do a more mature Spider-Man, and it would feel different from the initial trilogy that we got.
With Tom Holland, yeah, because the initial Tom Holland was definitely a little bit more acting, still high school, still learning all the ropes and everything else like that. But now he's sort of, you could say, graduated. I mean, I don't know if they'll probably put up the college aspect of it since they are going to MIT.
Yeah.
But now he's kind of more into that. He has to take that Stark type of mantle, which he has, which he realized he has to take up that mantle. But he's still going to be himself,
his own hero and stuff, because that was kind of the whole point of the Home trilogy. Is
Yeah.
this is a younger Spider-Man. He's learning how to become the Spider-Man we know him to be.
Yeah, and it's like the Home trilogy is more about him kind of like moving out of his comfort home, basically, because it's like Far From Home, No Way Home, or it's like like Homecoming, Far From Home, then No Way Home, because it's just like now you can't go back, basically. Now you have to kind of like move on, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, if Sam Raimi is allowed to make a new trilogy with this mature Spider-Man, I would not mind that at all.
Yeah.
And I would not have minded had he made another movie with Tobey Maguire.
Yeah.
Because he promised that had Spider-Man 4 been made, it would have rectified the mistakes of Spider-Man 3 or tried to make up for it. Because I know they were planning as far as Spider-Man 6.
Yep.
But obviously that didn't happen, and we had to reboot the character again.
Yep, definitely for sure. And also too, we'll probably see Venom if like Tom Holland does come back as Spider-Man, in the MCU again. Probably will.
Yeah, because they're setting that up that we might see Venom. I don't know if it's going to be the same Venom, because there's a fan theory that it's like some kind of hive mind almost.
Because it is like a hive mind across different universes per se, but they all kind of like collectively know their knowledge basically from different Venoms.
Yeah, that would be that. All right, so the last thing I want to say before we wrap this up is, where does this rank among the Phase 4 films that have been released so far?
I mean, it's still like midway, not towards the end quite yet, but sort of like that midway, but it's up there right now in terms of like a top, still a really good movie. But it's still, again, because Phase 4 is a lot more TV shows rather than movie oriented right now.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like, I would say I thought this was better than Spider-Man No Way Home, if only because they did some really cool things with the multiverse. Whereas with Spider-Man, it was all about bringing the other film series back while still keeping a Spider-Man story of sorts.
I would still say No Way from Home is still a better movie than Doctor Strange, although I like Doctor Strange a lot, but I would still probably consider Spider-Man a better movie, though. But as of right now, there is very selective movies. It's more TV shows in Phase 4 than, movies. So right now, I believe those two are the only two movies right now before the Ant-Man and the new Avengers and other movies could have come out. Because, again, this is more TV show-oriented phase rather than movies.
Yeah, but I keep it focused on the films, and I know the TV shows are becoming more involved.
Yeah.
But for me, it's like, I think this is above Spider-Man No Way Home, and I like Spider-Man No Way Home. I just felt like Spider-Man No Way Home was like, we need to come up with an idea that will get a lot of money, and we need to get as many people in the theater as we can. So they brought back previous Spider-Man because Into the Spider-Verse happened, and we're like, let's do that, but bring back people from the other film franchises. And though it was good, it's just kind of not the story I would have told.
See, I like that idea though with No Way Home, just because you are dealing with the multiverse aspect of it, and every other villain's going to come in. So it did make sense to bring those heroes into Tom Holland's universes, because you are bringing back other variation villains to Tom Holland. So it's like, it makes sense to bring those Spider-Mans, because they have knowledge of those villains, into Tom Holland to help them out.
I guess so. The way I would have done it is like, at the end of Homecoming, they kind of set up a Sinister Six like team where Vulture and the Scorpion are like, I know some guys who want to go at it with him and stuff. And we could have had Scorpion in the movie, but they decided not to go ahead with that.
No, because again, Far From Home, you had Mysterio, who was trying to basically kind of like, kind of play down on, Spider-Man's mind. It was more mental game with that one versus like the physicality that he dealt with in Homecoming. Because Homecoming was a lot more physical. Far From Home was more mental. And then the No Way Home was a combination of both. Both physical, because Green Goblin was beating the crap out of him. He had much more intense strength. But also mental too at the same time, because he played with the heartstrings of Spider-Man, basically.
Yeah.
Especially with the killing of Aunt May.
Oh yeah, definitely. But I think really it's like with Spider-Man No Way Home, it's like more Spider-Man, less multiverse, and that's, I mean, I just don't know. I would have done the story differently. I wouldn't have brought in all the other people, because like the multiverse, I kind of feel may hurt the MCU.
Well, when you play with like time travel and multiversal dimensional thing, it's always a risk, no matter what sort of movies or things you do. It's always a risk, but you have to play it right.
But I think really it's like with the other films and the other movies and the other characters, it's like in Spider-Man No Way Home, they just feel tonally inconsistent with their own movies,
I kind of feel like, again, going to No Way Home with the whole multiverse aspect, again, because he tampered a little bit with it in terms of like, who gets to know who about Spider-Man, like who gets to know who Spider-Man really is. Then all of a sudden, incursions or kind of like things happen to where it's like, these guys were brought back in because these selected people knew, Spider-Man, but because of that knowing, some villains who had connections to certain characters just from different universes knew through them, and so they were brought in.
Well, what I mean by like tonally inconsistent is like, basically, this is not how they would act in their respective film franchises. They were MCU-ified. They had to act within the boundaries of the MCU, sort of.
Sort of, but again, they were brought in the moment of time frame from their death per se, or like prior to their death. So like the Dr. Octavius, this was like right before he was uncorrupted by the machine, basically.
Yeah, the AI thing he's got in the back of his neck.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the AI. Green Goblin, right before he was stabbed, through the guts.
He had the serum injected into him through like the air and whatnot.
Yeah, and so on. Yeah, but again, it was right before his death, or before Electro, lost, right before he died, basically per se, or before Lizardman goes back to his human form, basically, or Sandman, before he kind of fades away, basically. These were all kind of like villains that were brought in prior to their deaths, or prior to them losing, basically.
I guess. And then, I mean, it's just with the multiverse here, it's like they do some really cool things.
Yep.
They go more into it. And when they bring back Patrick Stewart, he's not from the 20th Century Fox series. This is a different version.
Yep.
And he's not connected, so he's allowed to act differently.
Definitely, for
Whereas,
sure.
like, if you bring back the other Spider-Man villains, it's like I expect them to act the way they do. And they did, but I did kind of notice some inconsistencies, but that's just me. I'd have to write a review and publish that.
Yeah, inconsistency, because again...
Just the way they would like if the way they act in the MCU at points is not how they would act in their own film franchise.
Oh, you mean how like they were like okay with Spider-Man per se, like taking him up to like his place and helping them out a little bit?
Yeah, stuff like that, and the comedic moments, like all the random comedic stuff, because the older films didn't focus too heavily on that. They found their balance.
No, but at the same time, this again goes to any sort of thing. If you were thrown into a different one, even if you're a villain, if you don't like that person, but you know that, hey, you're that person, but you're not the person I know from this one. I'm not too sure how you act here, per se, compared to what I am in, or what you are in this one. So it's sort of that little confusion, in which they were respectfully so. They were confused, because it's like, it still looks the same, it is still the same place, but it's not what I'm used to. So, but you're Peter Parker, but you're not my Peter Parker. Or like, this is New York, but this is not my New York. Sort of thing. So they're still collectively, they don't know how this Peter Parker acts. They don't know how this Spider-Man acts.
Yeah, I guess so. I gotta write a review of that in the future and publish it. But anyway, I just, and really, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, I would say it's better than Eternals.
Definitely that, yeah.
But any Phase 4 film is better than Eternals, let's be honest.
That was a little bit of a dull one. I'm hoping that they kind of like make it a little bit more exciting, especially with with the Black Knight.
Oh yeah, whatever they're gonna do with him.
He may be more anti-hero-ish, I believe, hopefully so. Because I think Black Knight was a little bit more of like that dark, kind of like hero per se. I mean, hence the name Black Knight.
Yeah, so if nothing else, I would say this is the third best film so far.
Yeah.
What's higher than Doctor Strange in my mind? That's kind of a tough one, because it's like, I like both Black Widow and Shang-Chi.
Oh, Black Widow, okay, Shang-Chi was a really good film.
Yeah, that was like that was one of the best ones, because it's like...
That was a really good one. I would not throw Black Widow above Doctor Strange. I would probably, for me, it would be Shang-Chi, then Spider-Man before Doctor Strange. Black Widow was a decent film. I mean, it probably would have been received better had it been, more of a Phase 3 instead of a Phase 4.
Oh yeah, like it should have been in there. But when I saw Black Widow upon the first screening, because he and I saw it a second time.
Yeah.
And when we went to this screening, remember those kids that were being rowdy and causing trouble?
Yeah, a little bit about that. Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely.
When we saw Black Widow I saw it a second time with him. There were these rowdy kids in the theater and stuff.
Yeah.
Jeez, that was one of the worst theater experiences I've ever had. At least I muscled through it.
Yeah.
But anyway, when I saw Black Widow the first time, I liked it because it was serious. It was a little darker and showed like some really nasty things about her past.
Definitely, for sure.
And it was very action orientated, and it was just a lot of fun,
Oh yeah.
And when I saw it, I'm like, this is way better than Spider-Man Far From Home, because, jeez, I hated that movie.
Yeah, but again, like I said, I think it would have been a lot more better had it been Phase 3 than instead of Phase 4, basically. At least Black Widow. It's still a good, decent film, but...
Yeah, I mean, in terms
it's more of a Phase 3 than a Phase 4.
Yeah, in terms of where it takes place in the timeline, it takes place between Infinity War and Civil War. Yeah, had you released it in Phase 3, I mean, it would have, I don't know, made more money.
Yeah, although we would not have gotten that post-credit scene at the end,
That sets up the Hawkeye show, which I have yet to watch. I still have to watch Moon Knight.
Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, Hawkeye and Moon Knight are both pretty good right there.
Yeah, so if nothing else, I think Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness is better than it's better than Spider-Man No Way Home and Eternals. It's at least that good.
To me, I think it's still a really good film. I would probably still put Spider-Man, but definitely Shang-Chi ahead of Doctor Strange.
I would probably put Shang-Chi as number one because I just felt it was really unique in spots. And I kind of felt like if Shang-Chi was an anime, and this is the actual official film adaptation, I would say it's the best anime adaptation I've ever seen.
It was, because it felt very anime, but live action, but it was a proper way. It's almost like if you take an anime adaptation, like if it was originally an anime, and then it was brought into live action sequence, it would have been a really good one. Probably one of the best anime adaptations of it, like you were talking about.
Yeah.
Just like we all hope for in a lot of these variations, but it doesn't turn out that way from like either video games to movies or
some books to movies per se.
Because anime adaptations are very difficult to do, and there's been notoriously bad ones over the years.
Yeah, like I know, like I think Dragon Ball or something.
Dragon Ball Evolution, jeez, the Dragon Ball fan base hates that movie.
Yeah, it was not really good adaptations. But I did know, even though I barely seen some of this one, but Japan has done a couple of their own live action and adaptations.
Oh yeah, I mean,
I know they did it with Bleach, and I know they did it with Attack on Titans per se.
oh yeah, I saw a trailer for that.
Yeah, Japan has done their own live action variations of some of their more well respected animes, basically. They haven't done so yet with Naruto, but I know some. There are some YouTube's kind of like fan, videos or like fan trailers of what could be like a Naruto live action, type of movie.
Well, if you do a live action Naruto film, please include a scene where they all charge Area 51 and they move faster than the military's bullets. To pay tribute to the Area 51 meme where they're like, if we Naruto run, we can move faster than the bullets.
Yeah. The thing is, they would not do that because it's not like a militaristic. It would be more towards the story rather than like a what if like Naruto was in the like Earth per se. So they probably would not be an Area 51 type of thing.
Mm.
I think it would be a lot more of like trying to see kind of like the Hokage's, or not the Hokage, but the village per se. I think the first movie would have been more about pain, that whole, the Akatsuki type of thing, part 1 before Obito.
Yeah, and maybe if like they ever do future anime adaptations, Guillermo del Toro should do a Neon Genesis Evangelion live action adaptation because he did Pacific Rim. Maybe he could tackle that.
He could, but that one. I mean, that one's going to be a lot. That would be a lot more gory, basically, because if you want to think about it in perspective, it's those giant mechanical things, but bloods do kind of still guts kind of spill out of those giant mechanical things.
Yeah, I've seen little clips, but I got to watch the entirety of Neon Genesis Evangelion and the movies.
Yeah,
but I hear the movies are like mentally tough to get through.
Well, and the show too, because that can get a lot graphic in sort of ways too. And I think the original adaptation didn't end it didn't end up well. I think
the last 2 episodes were controversial because of the ending, and then the movies had to rectify that.
Yeah, the movie rectified those type of things. Yeah, where the ending of the original show were very controversial, very indeed.
Yeah, but anyway, that was kind of our anime ramble a bit. So. Yeah, to wrap this all up, I did enjoy this film. I thought it had, like you said, good themes in it. I thought the acting was very well done. The visual effects were really cool and creative at times.
Yeah.
And I liked this story. I actually liked this story a lot better than people were making it out to be. Because I've seen some reviews where people were downvoting this thing, saying that, oh, this isn't the greatest movie, this story isn't all that great, or it's just not what I wanted.
I hear more of it wasn't lived up to like some of the expectation. It's like, yeah, maybe not, but still a really good film nonetheless.
Yeah, this is not as bad as some people are making it out to be.
No, I mean this is that's some people. Yeah, no, this is a really good film.
Because you want to talk about bad MCU movies? Well, when Iron Man 3 came out, I thought it was one of the weakest entries.
It was a pretty weak one. Yeah, Iron Man 3 wasn't not that great.
Because when I saw the trailer for Iron Man 3, I thought we were going to get something like The Dark Knight Rises.
Oh, yeah?
Because I love The Dark Knight Rises and that entire trilogy. And I thought Iron Man 3 was going to be like that. But when I saw the movie, I was crushed by what I saw.
It wasn't really all that promising. And then, of course, Eternals was more... I don't know. More... I mean, it did have some action sequence in it, but it felt boring.
Yeah, it was not really compelling enough. Like, it could have been interesting, but they just didn't make it compelling enough. And the director was inspired by Zack Snyder's DC movies when she made it.
Well, yeah, because Icarus was more Superman, but I mean, he wasn't like evil, but it was still kind of like if he was not the nicest guy, basically. Still.
Yeah, and then when Thor: The Dark World came out, I remember not liking that movie. But in hindsight, it's a lot better than Thor: Ragnarok. I can tell you that now.
Ragnarok was actually a decent film, but
Ragnarok was the one that really destroyed Thor for me. because the director made it a huge comedy fest, not realizing this could have been an epic fantasy film, and then he takes my favorite Hulk storyline, Planet Hulk, and butchers it.
I mean, he is basically kind of like strong like that, but I kind of view. I remember there's an anime like Hulk, where it's not Planet Hulk, but it's like
The animated Planet Hulk movie is a lot better, but
Yeah.
we're getting ahead of ourselves. We'll save all the Ragnarok stuff for
Yeah.
Love and Thunder.
But there is still a Hulk out there that still hasn't been used quite yet, but he's still a very formidable one. Not smart Hulk, but like it's like this. It's like an older Hulk. I forgot his name right now, but he is probably a little more, probably the most powerful Hulk because not only he's still freakishly strong, but he's very smart and intelligent.
Yeah, there's like other Hulks, and we're never going to see the Devil Hulk on film. I know we're never going to see the Devil Hulk.
No, I think the more not Planet Hulk or something like that or War Hulk, but it's like the
Red Hulk?
no, not Red Hulk. There's people probably in the comments will mention this too. A bearded Hulk per se that's basically really really strong basically, but since his intelligence is there, like he's really smart, so he's basically become like almost like this very very big threat basically, because it's like not only that he's freakishly strong, but he's smart. But he went through something so bad, or something not into his favor, that he's kind of is like a bad guy.
Yeah, back to the whole bad Marvel movie thing. I would say Age of Ultron is the weakest of the Avenger movies, if only because I felt it could have been darker and more serious.
Oh yeah, because you talked about how they should have been more AI.
Ultron should have been more scarier than he already was, because he wasn't all that scary when he makes all these quippy jokes. And I know that's based off of Tony Stark,
Yep.
but the Ultron I would have done would have been more in line with Skynet's from the Terminator movies.
You probably would have been, and you watched What If, so you were more in line of what If did with their Ultron.
Yeah, their Ultron is what I wanted the live-action Ultron to be.
Yeah.
And then, continuing forward with weak Marvel movies as well, we're going to save my ranting for Ragnarok when we get to Love and Thunder.
Yep.
I thought Ant-Man and the Wasp was a very standard movie. Like, it wasn't...
Yeah.
It's basically between Infinity War and Endgame.
Yep.
Like, it's kind of filler material almost,
Yep.
but I get what what it's setting up and building up to, and its place. Oh, I didn't like Captain Marvel. Jeez, I didn't like that one.
Yeah, I think Captain Marvel was probably one of the more weaker ones.
There was too much controversy surrounding it.
Yeah.
And then Spider-Man Far From Home. Jeez, I hated that movie.
Decent one, but yeah, I mean, again, they did play with a lot of Iron Man stuff, kind of like that. Playing with, Magneto playing with Spider-Man, although a good one, but yeah, I mean, well, it's a decent film.
The problem with Spider-Man Far From Home is that it just didn't really feel like an authentic Spider-Man story, And then I played the PS4 game like a year later.
Oh, yeah?
And I'm like, this is more Spider-Man than the MCU Spider-Man. And I'm still excited about Insomniac's sequel, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're going to see Venom in that, and they got Tony Todd to voice Venom. That's going to
yeah.
be really cool.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, if you get it, I'm pretty sure people have seen this already, but if you get a chance, go out there and make up your own opinion on Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. We both thought it was good, and, well, I just think it was a good continuation of Doctor Strange's story, and it was a good continuation for the MCU. And now I'm actually excited to see Doctor Strange 3 and what that's going to be about.
We'll see what they announce, but if you look back at all the the plans and something like that, the rest of Phase 4 and Phase 5, I don't think the third Doctor Strange was announced.
They haven't announced it yet, but this movie's made enough money that they'll probably go ahead with it.
They'll probably go ahead with it, but it probably hasn't been. Yeah, it hasn't been announced quite yet in terms of the initial planning, basically. But it will be there soon.
Yeah.
Or at some point.
Yeah. Thor: Love and Thunder obviously is the next one, but I'm cautious about that. We'll see how that goes. I don't really know if, because I really hated Thor Ragnarok, and I don't think this one could be worse than Ragnarok, but I'm just really cautious about it because it's the same director and stuff. It's probably going to be a comedy fest. It's probably going to just be set up for Guardians 3 because I know the Guardians are in the movie.
Yep. I mean, there will be a good amount of comedy just because the Guardians are in there.
Yeah, so that'll be the next Marvel movie we got to see.
And considering that Zeus is also in there as well, who's probably going to try to put his claim as, like God per se, so there's going to be a good amount of Greek mythology involved. So there will definitely be a lot of thunderous action, basically.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. And our next vlog, it will be Jurassic World Dominion.
Yeah.
Cautious about that one too, so we'll see how it goes. But when we do that, because we didn't have a trailer, I'll explain more of my stance on that.
Yep.
Because I really want to make that one a big review if I can.
Oh, yeah?
So it should be fun.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm cautious about it. We'll see how it turns out.
Yeah, I can understand that for basically the 5th of the Jurassic Park or the World, series. 2nd of World, basically.
Yeah, so let's just see how Jurassic World Dominion goes, and we'll definitely be back. We'll make another video and tell you how it goes.
Yep.
But anyway, that's our thoughts on Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Thanks for watching. Say goodnight.
Yep. See you, people. Have a good night or a good day or whatever you're watching it at some point of day.
We'll see you around.
Yep.